So good morning, everybody. Can folks in the back hear me? Can you hear me back there? Great, thank you. Good morning, I'm Brian Cusack, and for those of you who I haven't met, I'm the Industry Director for Health Services here at Google. So I work with all of the teams that work with all of you. So who's here in Chicago as a non-resident visitor, possibly for the first time? Okay, not for the first time, but they're just a visitor. All right, a lot of us. I had my first Wrigley Field experience last night, which was awesome. And I already told some people this story in terms of how various Wrigley Field experiences can go. I'm from Boston, so Fenway Park is my current perspective on Major League Baseball stadiums. So no offense, but I've seen one that's actually possibly less elegant and older than the one we have in Boston now, which I thought was impossible. But we sat on one of those rooftops across the street from right field in Wrigley. And I got back to my hotel room last night, and a friend of mine had pinged me to say, oh, you almost saw history, because the Cubs pitcher had a one-hitter into the 8th inning last night. A no-hitter into the 8th inning and threw a one-hitter. I had no idea whatsoever, okay? Zero, okay? So I pinged the person back, and I said, I had no idea. He's a Chicago native. And he pinged me back saying, that's what happens on the rooftops, okay? You're there, but you're not there in any number of ways. So a great first Wrigley experience, by all accounts, by all measures. So we have you for anywhere from 3 to 6 hours today, depending upon what you've signed up for. And we're excited that you've come to join us today. The morning is presentations, but I hope you'll think about the morning as an opportunity to interact as well. I'm going to find ways to try to get you engaged, not so much with the content, but at least to make sure that you're engaged by using the very cheap tactic of giving you prizes for participation, okay? You have to be here to win the prizes, okay? So don't disappear early or you might not win a prize, and at least one of the prizes is pretty darn cool. This is the third time we've done this, what we call BrandHealth. It's our own, our health services group at Google, kind of branded opportunity to talk to health marketers about issues and market conditions that they face on a daily basis. We did one in New York, we did one in LA, we did one in Chicago. We've been doing them about every 4 or 5 months. So I know many of you have traveled from near and far for this. But at some point, hopefully, we'll be in a market nearer to you, and we'll have a chance to do this with you again sooner than later. We are going to, if you happen to be tweeting, it's hashtag BrandHealth, okay? We're also videotaping, or videoing this today. We're not taping. We're videoing this today, recording this, and all of the content will be posted. We can certainly get you the slides if you want afterwards, but we have a YouTube channel. We eat our own dog food, as we sometimes say at Google. We have a YouTube channel called youtube.com/marketingclinic, where we post kind of a little play on words for the health thing. It's a marketing clinic for marketers. And we'll post content like this and certain other things on the channel. And so you guys will be able to go view the content from today there. We haven't done this before, but this is a list of every company or agency or partner that's represented here today. It's an interesting and diverse group, and the reason for posting this is so that maybe if you're interested in meeting someone from one of these other organizations, you could talk to your Google representative and we could possibly facilitate your meeting someone from this organization. And then it would be up to you, what you do with that connection going forward. But there might be some interesting learning or synergies that can happen between some of the groups here. So again, if you notice anybody on that list, feel free to speak to your Google counterpart and we'll try to facilitate a meeting. As I mentioned, we've got 3 speakers this morning. Each of them brings something very different. I'm going to kind of cover 3 areas at a very high level. We're going to show you an out-of-category case study where performance marketing worked for a particular marketer, how it was measured, and how it also helped increase brand metrics for that performance-oriented marketer. And then we have Neil Hoyne speaking, Excuse me, I have a little bit of a sore throat, so if I break periodically, bear with me. Neil Hoyne speaking. He's a brilliant Google ninja in the area of analytics and attribution. And I always look forward to sitting down and hearing Neil speak, because I take away 3 or 4 key learnings every time I do. We're going to have a break at 11, so if you need to break, that's fine. If you need to break any time, of course, that's fine. There are restrooms on this floor. If you go out the back door, you'll see signs that bring you there. It's essentially a left, a right, and about 40 yards down the hallway, the bathrooms are against a yellow wall on the right. Of course, anytime you have to get up for a phone call or any reason, do that. We have lunch. I think lunch is going to be in this room. And then after lunch, for some of you have signed up for kind of a version of speed dating, where Neil will be available to talk about specific attribution and analytics challenges that you might be facing, or maybe follow up with some of the things you've seen him speak about. And then we'll have one of our performance solution experts come and talk about performance marketing. And I think those of you who have signed up for that know who you are, but I think we're rolling through in kind of half-hour increments with the experts. So as I said, cheap ways to get you engaged. I'm going to give away my first prize right now. And there are questions. I have questions that I have prepared for you. And I hope you'll look at this as the icebreaker to get your ongoing participation. Within 4 months, who can tell me when the first tweet was sent? Within 4 months. And special bonus if you can tell me who sent it. Yeah. Yes and yes.
Okay, I go with January 2000.
No. Someone else with a guess? Yes. No. I want to give someone something here, folks, and I can't let you guess all day. Okay? Yes. Nope. You guys got to go back further. Yes. No.
March 21st, 2006.
Okay, that is exactly the correct answer. And so the answer is March 21st, 2006. Future rule consideration, there is no Googling for the answer. However, since I did not state that, I wasn't planning on giving away the cool prize now anyway. So here's a Chromecast for you, okay? Congratulations. Remember the new rules, okay? Did you happen to read who sent it? Jack Dorsey is the name. Okay. All right, there are 2 more good prizes to give away. Have to be here to win. Okay, so as I said, I'm going to lead us off by talking about 3 different areas. For those of you who work regularly with the Google team, over the past couple of years, you've probably seen us bring you third-party research from Compete or from the modelers. I've brought some research today, which confirms a lot of the things we've been telling you already, maybe with some slightly different insights around consumer behavior as it relates to health. And it's from a study that Google's Market Insights group did with Ipsos. We're going to use that. I'm going to use some of the Compete data, some Pew data, and some Google consumer survey information where we gathered some insights over the course of the last 10 days using our own survey capabilities. I'm going to talk a little bit, I'm going to show you some examples of some interesting things people are doing with or marketers are doing with their brands. 2 of them are health examples. One is out of category, but really creative, elegant ways to interact with consumers and potential customers or patients when there may not be an obvious need for the marketer for that patient or that consumer. And then lastly, I think I'm going to try to do a little bit of brainstorming with you, really fast brainstorming, and show you some ways we're thinking about using Google platforms and Google products in ways you may not be thinking about us right now. So have all of you seen this slide from us at this point? You know the story of the first moment of truth? Some yes, some no. Who's a no? Okay, for the no's in the crowd, super quick. P&G Procter & Gamble coined this phrase 15 or 20 years ago, the first moment of truth. It's that moment when a shopper or a consumer walks into a store, and in the first 3 to 7 seconds when they walk into that store, like in a particular aisle in that store, they have a moment of truth when they decide what product they're going to buy, which is why, you know, the position on the shelf, the end caps, all those things are so important. Procter & Gamble, being Procter & Gamble, realized this and actually created a role at Procter & Gamble, which is the vice president of the first moment of truth, to do even deeper analysis into this and understandings around this so that they could really and truly own that first moment of truth for selling their consumer goods at a retail level, okay? We believe, as it relates to health-oriented purchases and considerations, the first moment of truth historically was, you know, there's some stimulus, right? Some stimulus. It could range from something very simple as it relates to your health to, and I know we have a variety of folks in here in a variety of categories, so I'll try to, you know, make it as relevant as I can, but imagine your own business. It could be waking up and having a really bad rash. It could be having your spouse or partner tell you your clothes don't fit anymore. It could be any number of stimulus, okay? It could be you've just had your second, or you've had a return of a cancer diagnosis, okay? Any number of stimulus happen, and that first moment of truth historically for things like that, for these types of events or stimuli, was talk to a human being, usually a trusted human being, a family member, a physician, an expert in the category, because those were the options, and that's the way that human behavior dictated you took the next step. And once you talked to that expert, you then moved on through your journey to your eventual resolution or your eventual treatment, and then you move beyond that into advocacy and loyalty and things such as that. The web, we believe, has essentially changed that. We're going to get back to the first moment of truth in a few minutes, but I'm going to take you through, as I said, some market stats from that Ipsos study that we talked about. You can't see the fine print here, but again, it's a sample of about 1,700 individuals. Now, the data is somewhat biased, and I'm going to tell you that right up front in the area of full transparency. To participate in this study, you have to be on the web, own a smartphone, and have been engaged in some sort of health activity via the web, okay? And you're 18 plus, okay? So those are the qualifications. I'm going to show you a slide in a few minutes which suggests that while this biases the study somewhat as it relates to the results here, since so many people today are using the web for health purposes, it's still a good representative study. Anyway, obviously, or not obviously, of those people, when we asked them where they are turning, 100% said to the web. Yes, that makes sense. But 38% of those people are not turning immediately to a healthcare professional. 58% of those people are not turning to family, friends, and colleagues. A lot of them are not turning to television. Folks who are web-based already are turning to the web, of course, but a growing portion of people are not turning, at least as it relates to this first moment of truth concept, to those first resources that were historically their first moment of truth resources, their first moment of truth direction. And what devices are they doing it on? Those people, 87% of them are doing it on computers, 65% on smartphones, 66% on tablets. So that's pretty interesting because 13% of them are telling us they're not even doing it on a computer, right? That they're doing it on some sort of portable device. So the whole concept of your mobile strategy starts to become more and more important all the time. I would think that with at least some of you, if not all of you, we've shared the concept of the Mo moment. Have we talked about that with almost all of you? Who hasn't heard the Mo moment yet? Okay, don't be shy about raising your hands. You won't embarrass anybody. But I am taking notes. The Mo moment. The Mo moment is, for those of you who know it, and for those of you who don't know it, is us taking a look at query volume against your kind of category of queries or queries related to the category in which you are, and identifying that point in time when mobile queries surpass desktop queries. And in some cases, queries on mobile have surpassed desktop in your category already. Right? It happened a year ago. In some cases, we can project that it's going to happen in the course of the next several months. This is just further indication of the power of mobile devices in the journey that people take as they make health decisions. We can look at that from a moment perspective. We can look at this from a third-party research perspective. And this only gets more and more true all the time. For those using mobile as a major part of their health journey, most are using websites, but apps are growing in importance as well. Okay, just relatively speaking. So for those of you thinking about your mobile web strategy and your app strategy, you find that apps are growing as an important and relevant consideration for consumers. So I said, this is a Pew statistic right now, this, if you look at it, and I'll do the math for you, there's a lot of numbers there, but basically what this says is at the turn of the century in 2000, about 12% of this is the entire American population. This is not the population that happens to be on the web already. This is not the portion of the population that's on the web and has a smartphone. This is the entire population of the United States, and this is as of 2013. In 2000, 12% of the population was going on the web is using the web for health research, to research health information, okay? If you look at last year, 2013, if you do that math, this tells us that 60% of the US population is using the web as a primary research for health research, right? So again, we know this all to be true. We sense this all to be true. The web is a growing and important part of all of your businesses, but there's dramatic rate of increase at which the web is being adopted specifically as it relates to one's health. If we look at the content that people are engaging on the web, or the resources that they're using, or the platforms that they're using, 60% in the earlier Ipsos third-party study tell us that they use search engines, 52% are using health-specific websites, 24% are using hospital or clinic websites. Now, a couple of takeaways from this, and if any of you have a point of view, love to hear it. If you think this is right, this is wrong, dispute it, have an insight. First of all, I think of search not as content, okay? I think of search as a window to content. It's the place I go before I take the next step to content where I will be engaged. If you happen to manage a hospital, you'll actually see that there's a high likelihood that people are stopping someplace before they might get to your website where they're engaging content around their particular condition, around their particular stimulus, before they get to your website. If you're on a clinic, same thought. If you're a marketer, same thought could be true as well. Knowing that there's a process that people go through before they land at some sort of engagement or conversion, thinking about the role of search, the role of content on the web, that is content off your site, becomes very, very important. And Grant, thank you for breaking the ice. I can't give you a prize, but yeah.
You know, when I see 24%, in a way I'm wondering,
Yeah.
So my question would be, actually want to go on hospital websites, but they just can't find them. So they're going to these in search engine.
Yeah.
So that's kind of my quandary. Like, is that something that's reflective of the fact that hospital websites suck?
So I'm not going to tell you that your sites suck, okay? That's not where I want to go. But here's, I think it's a little bit of a chicken and egg question, right? A reason your sites may not rise to the top of this particular question or answer is the kind of search optimization content strategy question, okay? And what we're seeing in the hospital space, as well as some other related health-oriented spaces, is those institutions, I won't just say hospitals, those institutions and organizations that are adopting or driving fairly sophisticated content strategies are finding ways to crawl up in terms of individually crawl up in this kind of framework, okay? So I think it's a little bit of a chicken and the egg. It's not a question of suck or don't suck. I think it's content strategy, relevant content. And then it's also a question of once they arrive there, are you giving them what they want, right? There's another concept I'm going to talk about a little bit later. I think it's my last slide actually, but I'll bring it forward. And in a more and more web-based society or digitally driven society in which we live, there's an important behavior to understand about consumers, and that is the expectation and need for instant gratification, okay? And particularly if you're a hospital, a reason a lot of potential patients or consumers might come to your sites is because they want to find a doctor and make an appointment, right? So for instance, if you're not equipped to deliver on the conversion the consumer is coming to your site for, you lose them fast. So it's not just a question of coming there, it's a question of doing something with them and keeping them there once you get there. The concept of instant gratification is more and more relevant for consumers today than it ever was, and will only get more relevant and create more pressure and stress on us as marketers to deliver gratifications when people arrive. So I think it's content strategy, it's delivery once they get to the site, and it's also inserting yourself in the process more appropriately and with larger scale. So I'm going to get to another slide in a second, but people go through a process as it relates to their health. I mentioned stimulus, there's stimulus, or we can think of it as marketing terms, as awareness, all the way through to conversion and then to loyalty. People are looking for different things. They're looking for different types of communications from you as they move through this journey with you. And so are you providing the right content at the right place to get them to come to you at the right time in their journey? We have a lot of information in our compete studies that talk just to that we've shared with a lot of you, but understanding the different points in the journey and delivering the right content at the right point is critically important. Long answer, may have answered with some of it, but I think we don't know exactly the answer the way you phrased the question, but I would consider all of those things as we think about it. People are looking for advice, they're comparing brands. Again, the question is, which of the following activities, if any, did you engage in online in the past 6 months when looking for medication or treatment for something or products? 59% read user or expert reviews, 56% look at various products or brands. A couple of things here, and I'm going to get back to this later. Remember this whole look at expert reviews. The whole concept is, what is an expert today? Almost entirely disappeared, okay, or is confused, or has been kind of, it's been confused because anybody can be an expert today. The ability to publish, to create content, publish content, and distribute content has been completely democratized so that anybody can do it, so anybody can be perceived as an expert. Concept of browsing or looking at various products and brands, critically important. I know you know this, but it's, more than half of the folks are telling us this. We've seen this in some of your categories. They're looking at lots of different options, and they're looking at lots of different options in many cases before you even know that they're in market, okay? Again, think of the first moment of truth concept, okay? I'm going to bring you back to that in a minute, but they're looking at lots of options before you even know they're in market. So I thought this was really interesting. This is one take, on the journey as we've described it: stimulus, research, purchase, find treatment, post-treatment purchase. The internet is most used during the research phase, okay? So that ability to scour the entire world's worth of content and information as I do research for myself to engage in a treatment, to purchase a health-related product, to possibly do it for someone for whom I'm a caregiver. The deepest internet engagement occurs around research. Internet's involved obviously in all of the other touch points in this journey as we describe it, but research seems to be particularly deep. I'm going to get back to this again in probably 6 or 7 slides. But now when you think about what people are using the internet most for, and you think about the content you want to deliver to them at different points during their journey, knowing there's an inordinate amount of time and effort spent in the research, or most people are in the research area, starts to speak to content strategy, for instance. Are you giving them all the content they need when they're doing the research itself, before they're making that decision? So, There's a journey consumers go on, there's a journey patients go on. Historically, we like to think of, we talk about, and I go back to that first moment of truth, we've kind of had, we've kind of broken up our lives, and I think I'm certainly of an age, and when I look at my teenage children, I think of something completely different, but you've kind of had this bifurcated life, right? I've had my digital life, and I've had my physical life, okay? For me, I have my physical life, whatever it is, and then I think I'm going to go to a movie, and I step out of my physical life for a minute, and I step into my digital life to research where I should go see it, or to research what I want to go see. And I still tend to think that way sometimes. My children who are teenagers, who are tomorrow's customers for you, and a lot of other folks in that kind of 25 to 40 category, don't think of physical life and digital life anymore. It's all completely merged for them. It's just life. So when we think about our physical life, again, managing our own health is the most important thing that we can do for ourselves in our physical life. More and more, there's no distinction between that physical life and that digital life. The digital life becomes the key component for managing my physical life in whatever way for whatever that means to me. Maintenance, exercise, self-improvement, treatment of disease, treatment of injury. The merging is happening. As marketers, it's important for us to understand that there is no distinction between digital life and physical life for a very large chunk of the patient and consumer base, or potential patient and consumer base, and a growing percentage of that. There's still some generation that some of you are chasing. When I say chasing, I don't mean that in a bad way, in that 55 plus category where this may or may not be the case, but it's happening there as well. It's also happening for their caregivers. So I think this is I'm not going to say it's a profound point, but it's a really important point, I think, for us to accept and for us to explain to others in our organization as you build marketing strategies, as you build growth strategies for your organization. So I bring you back to the first moment of truth, but I bring you back with a wrinkle, okay? If, as we've described, the web has become a much more central part of health management, of life, right? Not digital life and physical life, but the web is where life is lived in many cases for more and more people, particularly as it relates to health. The first moment of truth goes away to some extent, okay? And it is replaced by the zero moment of truth. That stimulus happens, I wake up, something's sore, something's not right, a family member's not right, my spouse or significant other tells me that my clothes are too tight. What's changed, Brian, in the last 6 months? No longer am I necessarily going right away to speak to an expert on the category or a trusted individual in the category. I'm going right to the web. The web is the zero moment of truth. So the journey starts in a very different place than it started historically. And as marketers, our challenge then is, if we believe this is the case, how do we insert ourselves at this, or how do we involve ourselves in the journey at this point and all points between that zero moment of truth and the conversion at whatever conversion it is that you're looking for, and all of those points in between. As we said, research, the choice that's made. This again is critical to our understanding. Now, if you want more on this, and I don't know how many of you folks know this, we actually have published a book on this topic. It's a pretty short, easy read book, but it's very interesting and very informative, using Google data and other data to kind of support this, and it's called The Zero Moment of Truth. It's actually written by an individual who sits right down the hall here, Jim Lisinski. And if you're interested, we could direct you to that. You can find it online, okay? But it's a great marketing read. Has anyone here read it besides me? A couple of you, okay. Google people, put your hands down. Okay, but a few of you have? Okay, great. Did you find it to be interesting and simple and easy to get through? Yeah, okay. Yeah, I would advise you to take a look at it if you're interested in the concept. Did someone want to say, oh, that was you guys, okay. You're gonna get a copy of the book for your customer? Okay. All right. So kind of move on a little bit now. So the web is growingly important. You know that, okay? We've supported that with more data. I'm going to look at how marketing can get inserted into this and what's the view of marketing. So who knows what Google consumer surveys are? Real quick, raise of hands. Not that many of you really. You know, we have a platform called Google Consumer Surveys that you can use at a very low price point to do really fast ad hoc surveys. Put questions out in the web and get answers, and you can generally get answers that are get some statistical significance. I would not say it's the same as paying Nielsen or Compete to do market-based research for you, but to get quick insights into market behaviors, it's a great tool. And like I said, it's super low cost to use. We use it. We used it to get the answer to this question. Consumers look for brands to provide them with trust. What makes you most likely to trust online health content? Sources cited was number one. Content comes from a trusted news site. Content comes from a trusted brand. Okay, so simple stuff, but there's ways to build trust that are more obvious, and we're stating the obvious for you, supported by this survey that we did last week, that you start to think about, that you integrate into your content strategy. If we go back to that, the points along the perspective and where the internet is used most aggressively, in the research phase that we described earlier, in the research phase, people are most receptive to ads, okay? Interesting. There's an insight to be taken from this in terms of potentially how you think about your marketing and your messaging. If you know people are at a content place on your site or off your site elsewhere on the web where they are researching their health choices, this is a place where the Ipsos study told us that they are most receptive to the messaging in an ad, or they're most receptive to content as well. And then we go back to the prior slide and see what gives people the most trust in what they're seeing. And they're also likely to click. I mean, I know this is what Google's business is based on. This is what you hope and expect to have happen. But people do click on ads, and they're clicking on ads most likely when, and this sounds again totally obvious, but give them content or give them an ad that specifically responds to a need that they are demonstrating. Okay. So points in the journey. Okay. You know what we're capable of in terms of delivering targeting for your messaging at different points in the journey. That's what we are known for. However, I'd like to start to move into a slightly different topic here, which is the topic of storytelling. If you're going to place content on the web or content within people's journeys, we believe that it's important for many of us to go beyond kind of the direct marketing approach that we take. And telling a story becomes really, really important. Telling a story to use sight, sound, and motion to generate trust, as people said they're willing to give to you, is a really critical skill set for an organization to develop. But we also have platforms today where storytelling can be delivered in ways that it's never been delivered before, at a scale at which it's never been delivered before. These are some of the areas we'd like you to think about, or we think you should think about as it relates to storytelling. How can we matter to people when they don't need us? Most of the stuff we talked about earlier was we know that they need us at a particular point because of a particular query. But we never know when many consumers are going to wake up one morning and have that stimulus. Wouldn't it be great if they were predisposed to think of us before they ever had that stimulus? So how can we matter to people when they don't need us? Where else can we meet people out of context but with relevance? Okay, what does that mean, right? It doesn't have to be specifically health related, but there could be some relevance based to who they are and also based on the message we could deliver. Why would someone be a fan of a health brand that they've never engaged with before? I mean, you might think that some of you don't have fun, sexy stories to tell, but maybe you do, okay? You're gonna try to dig deep and use some creativity to identify what those stories are that can create that relationship. And can a health brand have meaning to us in our everyday lives, right? Again, how do we predispose ourselves before the stimulus, after the treatment, after the program concludes? So I'm going to show you 3 examples right now of people who've done really interesting things. This one almost made me cry the first time I saw it. And I'll let it speak for itself, but it's health related, but it absolutely fits into that category of being out of context when you see it. Okay, it's totally out of context, but it does a great job of predisposing to the consumer. So hang on one second. Well,
amor que eu tenho pelo esporte é tudo.
A maior, não tem comparação, torcida, não tem. O resto é resto, o esporte é tudo.
Primeiro Deus, segundo esporte, terceiro a família e quarto é trabalho. Prometo que os seus olhos vão continuar assistindo o esporte.
Que os seus pulmões continuarão respirando pelo esporte.
Prometo que o seu coração sempre baterá pelo esporte.
Só se doa órgãos no Brasil, né, após a morte, depois que a família ela decide e assina um termo que autoriza essa doação.
A gente tem uma alta taxa de negativa das famílias.
Eu sou rubro-negro até depois de morrer, irmão. Minha alma é rubro-negra.
Ainda mais se quando eu doar meus órgãos, meu pulmão for pro cara do Náutico, pro torcedor do Náutico, ele vai respirar o esporte.
Se alguém leva meu coração, leva o esporte junto.
O meu coração vai transformar alguém em torcedor do esporte.
Dos gramados, o esporte está com uma campanha super bacana, pode salvar muitas vidas. Pra gente.
Eu não esperava que fosse assim tão rápido. Tá, eu tô muito feliz. Agora então que chegou logo aqui, ele é esporte. E vamos continuar torcendo pro esporte e vamos aí, torcida do esporte, vamos doar. Mas vamos mais pra corrente, né? Não vamos mais parar.
So you talk about out of context, right? Fanatical Brazilian soccer fans, and turning at least 51,000 of them into signed up donors, okay? Taking enormous passion, but completely out of context, and translating it to a life-saving, intensely personal decision, okay? Granted, this might be more dramatic than some of the topics we're dealing with on an everyday basis, but the concept of going completely out of context and delivering a way for passionate fans to be passionately involved in something equally, if certainly more important than their passion for their sports club. Pretty amazing and interesting way, and gives us maybe some creative sparks over and above what we do currently in context. Again, I'll let this one speak for itself. I'm not going to play all of it. It's a little too long, but it's a hospital in Dallas. It's essentially Baylor Medical. It's essentially created a reality programming concept that was broadcast on the web and broadcast on digital television. But again, this is where you're starting to engage people before they might need to. Okay, when they're
Gracie
not
thinks
necessarily
that
having
the disease is called surgery. So I said, mommy's sick and mommy's gonna have surgery. Do you know why she's having surgery? Yeah, because you have surgery. She doesn't know the cancer word.
The cancer word. For 30-year-old Michelle Burnett and her husband Stephen, it is a word that is about to change their lives. Today, they're meeting with Baylor surgical oncologist, Dr. Michael Grant.
Monday, I was diagnosed with breast cancer.
How much do you know right now?
Nothing. I'm here for answers. There's two things you want to know when you're diagnosed. Am I going to die and am I going to lose my hair?
Across campus, 25-year-old Sharice Daniels is moving into room 718 of Baylor's new cancer hospital. Diagnosed with acute myelogenous leukemia, a cancer of her white blood cells, she's trying to cope with the anger that is overwhelming her emotionally.
I don't think the anger really ever goes away. I don't want to blame the anger on God, but it's kind of like, why was I chosen to have cancer?
So, I mean, this could fit into a couple of the categories that we showed on the slide at the beginning of this section. How can a health brand have meaning to us in our everyday lives? I mean, they're telling a really important story that you can see that you can watch on the web at any time that you want or watch on television, although you may not have the personal or family need at that time. But it certainly predisposes the brand in a way that non-personal stories can't, okay? So interesting take on that. Certainly very, very powerful, but also challenging to find the right patients to tell this story around and to have them engaged in the right way. I said this programming or this content was distributed on the web and on television. There was also an enormous social component to it as well, where the patients had involvement beyond their appearance, right? So their stories became part of an ongoing story arc across a number of different platforms. Okay, this is totally out of category, but when you talk about out of context, and everyday lives, those two questions, this one's brilliant.
In Spain, all of our restaurants have free Wi-Fi. And since our signal reaches quite far, clients in other restaurants tend to use our network. So we decided to barter. If the restaurants next door steal our Wi-Fi, we'll steal their clients. To get people's attention, we did a very simple thing. We came up with a new media, our own Wi-Fi network, by changing the signal's name into a message. And since we were able to do so with one network, we did it with more to send out tastier messages. To get the message across, we did an out-of-home campaign on bus stops with Wi-Fi. We're always looking for new means to approach new clients, and if they're not out there, we'll make them up.
So brilliant, right? Technology, totally out of context. A simple action-oriented call to action message. Brilliant. This may not be relevant exactly to what you do, but certainly thinking about the capabilities that technology delivers and ways to think out of context, ways to integrate into people's everyday lives. Kind of a powerful, maybe brainstorming stimulus. We've been thinking about this category, health at large, and thinking about different ideas that we can bring to you that we'd like to talk about with you to see how you can possibly engage consumers or potential patients out of context in a powerful way, be part of their everyday lives. And we have 4 quick examples where we've taken some sort of insight or observation on consumer behavior and then have an idea. So I've actually heard this one a lot lately. I was at a health conference in Florida last week. This came up all the time. You know, everybody has, you know, I've got my Fitbit, you know, we've got all different kinds of wearables, quantifiable self. I've got too much information, and I've got all my health records that potentially I have access to. I've got too much information about myself. How do I digest all of that? How do I crystallize all of the data about myself to help me better manage to a healthy lifestyle? If you think about related areas of our lives, this is true in other areas. If you think about you know, depending upon where you are in your life, you know, the financial management of your life can be the same way. We've got IRAs, we've got different accounts, we've got 529s, the market is moving. How do I possibly take all of this data and manage my life, my financial health easily? Well, many of us have someone who serves as an advisor for us, right? A financial advisor. We don't really have that person as it relates to our health. We have a doctor, but the doctor's not the person you talk to every day about all this data that you're generating. But what if a health organization, what if a hospital, what if a weight loss organization, what if a set of clinics was able to set up the concept of a health broker where there were people who you give access to all of your data, and they're always on call for you. They're always on call for you to help you, to help you understand, crystallize, and filter all that data so you can make day-to-day decisions that matter and not be confused or threatened or scared by all the data that you have or overwhelmed by all the data. And how would you use technology to do that? When you think about, some of our video conferencing capabilities or some of the chat capabilities that you have, this is a very interesting and powerful concept, right? I mean, yes, it takes manpower. Yes, it takes some area of expertise. There's all kinds of waiver and liabilities issues that some of you would face with this. But this is a very powerful concept that this industry hasn't necessarily adopted at large, but other industries have that get people to engage more, okay? And the more they engage, the more opportunities you will have to create lifetime value with the people who avail themselves of a service like this. Who's Google Now, knows Google Now, uses Google Now, is told, here's the directions to the meeting in 15 minutes that you forgot you even had in 15 minutes, okay? Where Google Now is essentially not just your scheduler, but your personal assistant. Well, this is, a very powerful tool for those of us who are using it and have now grown to rely on it. Well, what if we developed a healthcare version of that? Right, where there's this anticipatory, take the health broker concept one step further, but use a Google Now-like technology or work with the Google Now folks to build this with a health capability so that you could now, through your mobile personal device, which you have with you all the time to a fault, to help you manage your health life, and maybe even combine that with the health broker concept to really use data for that in even a more powerful way. These are the types of things that we can talk to you about where we're using technology, where we use Google technology, map that to your technology or your data, and create some powerful stories for your customers or for your patients. All right, insights. Online video plays an increasingly important role in managing one's health. Okay, we didn't show you any statistics specifically about video, but we have enormous amount of statistics on the role that video plays in this consumer or patient health journey, right? More and more individuals are looking for expert testimony, procedural videos, customer testimonials on the web to help them make their decisions on a health partner in their lives, right? Sight, sound, and emotion expresses that in a way that no other platform can, or that no other platform can. Well, how do you as a marketer take advantage of that? What if you create essentially an editorial calendar of video content which is health related, right? That is maybe not stimulus related, but is something that can be used to manage my health on an ongoing basis, to create this ongoing relationship, predispose individuals to you so that when they actually have that stimulus, whatever it is, they come to you first, okay? Now, Grant, to your earlier point, you have to understand what is the most relevant content. You have to make it discoverable. You have to find a distribution strategy for it. But between using Google Helpouts, Google Hangouts, your own site, Facebook, a YouTube channel, What if you're able to manage this so that people can find you wherever they are? Remember, meet them in their everyday lives, because they're not going to hospital sites every day, but you know, between Facebook, YouTube, and a few other locations, they are going to these places every day. How do you become their health resource in all these other places? We can work with you to create a plan for that, a strategy for that. Last insight, we just picked weight loss as a particular industry or a particular health challenge. Losing weight is hard. The good news is that consumers are starting to incorporate activities and life experiences into their goals to achieve success. Well, when we look at certain demographics, the desire to do good is very powerful. What if we were able to tie weight loss into points earning that is actually points that can be applied to rewards for yourself or applied towards charitable good? And what if we were able to use various types of wallet or pay platforms and shopping platforms to enable you to do that, so it becomes very transparent or very easy for the user, customer, patient to track this and then leverage that, okay? Powerful concept in terms of being a good corporate citizen, powerful concept in terms of relating to individuals in the areas that interest them, doing good, and also gives them even more incentive to maintain their program or their engagement with the marketer or the treatment center or the hospital, okay? Again, we can provide you some of the distribution capabilities and partner with you to develop some of the technology capabilities to do this, but it's not going to be done solely with Google. There are offline components to this. There are online components to this. You know, this is something that requires a strategy across all of your marketing assets. But we sit around, and we actually have a kind of an in-house agency that does sit around all day and try and think of these things. And these are the kinds of ideas they're coming up with. And if you have a particular initiative or a particular brand initiative that you would like to contribute to certain performance metrics, we can try to find the insights that are right for your company and your customer base and apply them to the right idea or answer. So we're thinking about these types of things all the time and love to talk to you more about these things over and above just how is search performing today. I mentioned earlier a couple of key points. I'd love you to just, you know, think about these at some level. I mentioned instant gratification before. You got to deliver to people in real time. You know, in today's immediate turnaround, immediate access world, instant gratification is incredibly important. I mentioned experts everywhere as a concept. You know, depending upon what category you're in, you guys work for material organizations that kind of sit in the larger business or health world. I could be a solo practicing physician in somewhere in Manitoba. And frankly, the web today gives me the capability to appear to be just as expert as the most recognized global brand in the world, if I can crack the social and distribution code, which frankly most of the organizations have not. So you're competing for displaying or portraying and distributing your expertise with more and more people all the time. The competitive set, if you look at it that way, is changing on a daily basis because of the democratization of content creation and distribution. The other one I'll focus on for just a minute here, because I'm at my time, is this concept of the first two. Everything's connected, devices plus data brings us to knowledge and insights. Just like I mentioned that consumer 3 or 4 ideas ago who has too much data about themselves and doesn't know how to crystallize them and figure out what to do to better manage my health, you as marketers have too much data, right? There's no shortage of data. What data do I use to make decisions? What data do I not use? How do I combine data from different sources? The data is siloed across the organization. Well, we can't fix that challenge for each other today. That is the sheer volume of data and the fact that it might exist in many silos. But we need to come to grips with the fact that data is no good unless we derive insights from it. Okay, we tried to show some insights, right? Some consumer insights. What's the consumer insight that we derive from data? Are you gathering data for the purpose of deriving or creating a specific consumer insight that results in a specific action, that results in a specific idea? We're spending enormous amounts of time, as I said, gathering data, using Google consumer surveys, using our own Google data, using third-party data, come up with consumer insights to try to work with you guys to come up with appropriate actions as they relate to performance, but also as they relate to brand. like the McDonald's insight about what was going on in the neighborhoods around their restaurants and the action plan that they came up against it. So I think that's it for me. I won't go through the thoughts because I've talked about some of them once, if not twice already. Instead, I'm going to introduce our next speaker, and I'll give away another prize after this speaker. So it'll be break time after John, but don't run when he ends because I'll give away another prize. So John's a marketing consultant who currently is focused on the travel industry. It's John Thornton, and he'll be right up front here in a second. He advises on strategy, new media, and digital advertising for destinations, OTAs, and hotels. He works primarily on direct response marketing programs that also build brands through their digital stories. Before he came to Google, he was at RKG in Charlottesville, Virginia, where he attended college. He's a Cavalier, is that what I would say? That's correct, okay. And after that, he came to graduate school here in Chicago at Northwestern. Oh, and you've got your own lab. So John's going to walk us through a case study, different industry, but relevant learnings, I think, and relevant action ideas for you in the health industry. All yours, John.
How am I doing? Good?
Doing great.
All right. Hi, everyone. Really nice to meet you guys, and I'm really excited to be here. And excited to be trying something a little bit different, leaving the travel industry for a little while to visit the health industry and try something that's a little bit of a different example. Hopefully, some of the stuff that we've done will be applicable, and you can see some of the processes that we've tried. The example that I'm specifically going to talk about today is Nassau Paradise Island. That's one of the companies that I work with, their promotion board. And I think it's pretty well accepted across Google that that's like the most difficult job to support tropical islands. And most of you, I can feel like you're not, like, I need you to buy into that concept. I mean, this is much more difficult than you'd think. So because I believed that none of you would believe that this is a difficult job, I've included a picture of my most recent meeting with the board while we were out there. This is really tough times. It's actually a really interesting group. The Nassau Paradise Island Promotion Board is a group of privately funded hotels who basically pool money in order to try to promote the island. You've probably seen it. Some of similar ones, maybe a little bit more government focused, but some of them are like Virginia's for Lovers, Visit California, some of those things in the same vein and in the same group. But what I wanted to focus on primarily today was kind of talking through what it takes and what the process has been like for Nassau Paradise Island to kind of embrace digital video as a marketing channel, but then also just how they've thought about including it in their marketing and what that process has looked like. The time frame over which we've been working with digital video is probably 2+ years. And little Nassau Paradise Island, which doesn't show up in your McDonald's or Coca-Cola examples, is probably one of the most prominent and advanced video buyers that Google has at this point. And the reason I really point that out is to say, look, a lot of examples that we use, and Google is completely guilty of doing this all the time. And you see this all the time at marketing awards too. Look, if I had Nike's $1.2 billion budget, then I would do something really awesome. But I don't have Nike's $1.2 billion budget, so let's talk about something real and how we handle those situations. So I love this example for Nassau. And before we even dive into Nassau specifically, I want to talk about what are kind of the 3 things that you have to think about and understand before you dive into using video as an option, before you start making this a big part of your marketing budget. The first thing is we have to establish real goals. Establish real goals. And this was something I didn't realize until I had the time and talked to a couple different executives at different places and said, okay, well, what is it, if we were to do video, I mean, these are people who currently buy television. If we were to buy video, what is it that what do you want? Like, what's the goal of your marketing? And on multiple occasions, the answer I got is reach. That was the goal. And I'm sure some people are like, yeah, that's my goal right now too, is I also am looking to gain reach. But one thing I want to always make sure that we keep in mind as we make the moves and we change media is that none of our companies here sell reach. It's about, first of all, establishing what are the actual goals that you want your marketing to do. Why do we have a marketing department? And make sure we start from there. So for Nassau Paradise Island specifically, they are even probably closer to wanting reach than anyone else, but that wasn't the answer that we ended up with. The answer we ended up with is we wanted referrals to hotels on the island because we want actual visitors and actual traffic. So people learning about it, getting it into their kind of evoked set of where families might want to go to vacation. I'm sure you already have like 3 or 4 places in mind. I'm sure about half the room is already there right now. But that's the first thing, is make sure you stick to the business goals, because what can happen is we've had a lot of media, television, other forms of media where they tell you that the answer is whatever the media provides, but that's not actually what the goal is. So let's start there and make sure we establish that as the primary goal. That will be a guiding light through the very next part, which is that we have to find comfort in chaos. Because this is a really new form of media. It's a new form of communicating. It has a conversation component. It has a trackable component. We've never had video or sight, sound, and motion communicate to us in that way. Television is kind of a washover effect, and that's really the only source we've had for a long time. So we just deliver the message. We hope that we kind of get someone's attention and that they remember us, and then we just let it sit there. But this is all changing. This has so many different components, things that we couldn't even necessarily all highlight right now. But the fact that I can like give a user a choice, do you want to watch this? No, you don't want to watch this? Okay, well, we'll get you next time. And then we can tell who those people are, and we can take that information, and then they can comment on it, and they can write on your brand channel, tell you how terrible they think it is. That is completely different than it's ever been. That also means that the measurement is difficult too. How do we measure this? Is the digital department measure this, or does our television brand team measure this? It's kind of brand advertising, so lots of times for our marketing teams, that's where the money sits. But the people who are going to execute it are not the brand people. Brand people, be honest right now. That's the digital team a lot of times. And if you're both, rock out. But that's getting comfortable with that we might not know the answers, that there's going to be a lot of difference, there's going to be a lot of variations. Sometimes in marketing, we like to know exactly what we're going to get and exactly what's going to come back. That's not the case right now. And the next in that chaos is to be creative and analytical. So usually, we kind of reserve creative for over here and analytics over here. They sit in 2 different departments. But right now, if you have an analytical team, give them the right to think of completely new ways to measure this stuff. Measure impact, find new opportunities. There's like so many more ways to measure, so many more things that could give an indication that we're getting closer to the number one thing, which is what our actual goals are. There's so many more ways that we can track that. Be creative in your analytics, because honestly, a lot of the things you see here had never been done before by anyone in terms of how they were measuring digital video. And a lot of things you might come up with, you don't see a case study for any examples doing it because no one's thought of it yet, which, you know, for the nerds on your team and for the nerd in yourself is actually very exciting. Honestly, I think most of my life I just played sports because I wanted to give myself an excuse to be a nerd, which is what I actually am at my heart. But just take an opportunity here to take the creative side and say, what is something that we could take that would be interesting, that would indicate whether or not this is resonating with people? And it might not always be clearly defined out, but I promise it'll give you some cool insights, and it'll help define new tests and things that will come after that. So ultimately what we have is kind of a longer journey. It's more of a commitment to an idea of something that we know works, but we don't necessarily know exactly what we're going to get. You know, we get, I think, probably the Google team here gets a lot of RFPs. You know, can you please break down exactly how many impressions I'm going to get, exactly how many clicks I'll get? You know, what does this give estimates? But can you give me the exact numbers? I want to know what it is. I'm going to give you this much money. What do I get exactly in return? This kind of category of digital video and digital branding is probably more fluid than anything else that we do. Everything else is generally pretty predictable, but this is kind of branding brought into the digital space. And so what you have to do right now, if you want to make a commitment and know that this is something that's valuable, is you have to realize that you're committing to a process. You're committing to a marketing process that's going to evolve over time. And so you're basically saying, look, I know in the future that my marketing department in 5 years is probably going to look very different. My media mix is going to look wildly different just because of how things are evolving. So commit to it now, even if you don't have the answer. Because at this point, no one has the full answer into how to handle this. And we're getting closer and adding tools to do that. And we'll talk through kind of how that was done. So we'll talk a little bit about how Nassau did this. This process started probably in 2011. They've been actively optimizing and changing and evolving what they were testing. Things have worked, things haven't, and it's been going on for a couple years now until they really have a good routine towards what they're doing. And we can see some of that impact. So what Nassau did first is they did what most of us do, and this is great, was identify their key markets. Now, Nassau's markets sometimes are pretty easy to pick out. They direct flights. Direct flights. Now, I grew up in Richmond. There's not a direct flight to anywhere in Richmond, so, you know, unless the Atlanta Tourism Board was going to reach out to us. But, oh my God, this is the United States. Can you see this? Can anyone see that the United States is here? I feel like this is one of those Verizon commercials where I'm like, this is the United States. It's little blotches all over. Well, it's kind of there. So what they did is they identified their key flight markets, and they had about 14 total markets across the United States that had direct flights down to Nassau Paradise Island. Then what they did is identify 2 of the markets that they weren't going to advertise in. Now, this is something that I already like about the being creative and being analytical. They basically added a control group to their marketing. I think sometimes if we want to know whether or not marketing is effective, we have to not market in some places to figure out if it's working. Basically, what can we get down to? So we identified these markets. You have your Baltimore, your DC, your Atlantas, and then held out 2 of them to not see. And then the rest of the country never got any advertising as well. So what happened is we ran marketing and ran TrueView advertising in all of those markets for about 2 to 3 weeks. Basically, just running on those marketplaces, we ran a couple of different options. We targeted people who were interested in travel. We targeted people who were interested in beaches, destinations, kind of your typical targeting. And then we did something else, which is that we opened up a good portion of it to broad targeting and just said, look, if you're interested, it's a TrueView format. We only pay if you play. So let's just run it out there and see who is interested. And then we rolled it back and then just bid really low and said, look, we'll take anyone who decides that this commercial is worth watching. And I'll steal kind of an example of why I love that from the amusement park industry. So we worked with the amusement park, and one of the first things, if I go to a travel conference, I will inevitably make a joke about moms being decision makers. You guys don't think that's funny, but travel people think it's hilarious. Because everyone in the room is targeting moms, because everyone knows moms are in charge. But especially for amusement parks, who gets you there? Moms get you there. 45% of all people in an amusement park are there because mom decided that we were going to go, or mom did the research. Mom handled all of it. And the moms are like, yeah, of course I did. What do you think, dad did it? Please. But that's a target. They say 45%, those are the biggest decision makers. That's hands down the biggest group. I think dads are like 25%. Way to go, dads. I don't know how mom convinced you to be the decider. But that is their biggest target group. So almost all the advertising that they do and all the media they do is target moms. That makes sense. But this is a new type of advertising. Kind of like search, you're giving people choice. When you give people choice, that means you don't have to ignore the other 55%. If 5% of people were there because their grandparents decided for them to be there, well, if 5% of grandparents see your video and had the choice to watch it, then let's let them watch it. And that's the idea about opening it up, and what Nassau did as well. Is like, let's keep it broader. It doesn't, however you end up getting there, or however you happen to be the target market. In the past, we had to buy TV that kind of mostly hit our segment, but now we are given the choice. And that's the other thing I want to keep in mind. Let's keep it open and give us the opportunity to do this. So Nassau ran campaigns in all the different cities and followed for a few weeks. And what they did is they actually pulled out of the tools. Honestly, Google's tools were really sad in 2011 in terms of measuring this. It was like, how many views, how many clicks? And then you call and you say, I gave you this many views. And they'd say, okay. And that would be the end. And that's what I love too, is we had to push further than that. And so what we actually did is we started looking at Google Analytics, which is one of the greatest tools, and don't ever forget about it for measuring marketing. Because ultimately what we wanted to do is we wanted to see that users were taking a message, taking a video, and then taking some action towards the island. One step closer. And one step closer for them was trying to find information on their own, getting there and spending time on the website. And that was a great indication of a branding message that was moving someone just a step closer to consideration. And so we started tracking that. We didn't concentrate on the YouTube metrics. We pulled ourselves out of AdWords, and we just looked at Google Analytics and found that in the markets that were running TrueView, we were seeing year-over-year lift close to about 68%. Visitation was up 68%. Now, also don't forget, we put a control in because that was important to us. We didn't want to just say this because as much as I'd love to just tote around 68%, the whole site was growing at about 20% year over year. So there was a good indication that we were seeing growth across the website, and I would have loved to take credit for that, but we cut that out and said, look, we're going to grow an additional 68% in those markets. And we made sure we also tracked too to see it wasn't just direct flight markets, which is why we pulled 2 direct flight markets out. Because direct flight markets get things like posters and billboards that say new flights to Nassau, and we wanted to try to see if we could get as much control as possible. Is it perfect? Not even close. Scientists would be sad right now at our control. Honestly, I brought this to our research department and said, look, we need to do something with this market match analysis, and the researchers just could not get over the number of things that we did not control for, and really poked a lot of holes, but honestly, we kept testing it. So this was the first time, kept testing it and kept building on it, but it is something that shows we had a growth in brand. We had a growth in awareness and a growth in a behavior. And the other thing that we saw here is that people took actions that weren't just coming from YouTube. So YouTube does have a direct channel, right? People can just click and go through. But the total growth in those markets was much, much larger than the direct traffic, which is what we love to see because we couldn't tell how many people came organically or did direct loads or did search. We didn't have the information to tell how that behavior was happening, but we could tell that more people were coming. And we kind of didn't care how they got there, which was great. So this was the early stage. This was test 1, and this is when we felt really good about it. And this is, for me as a salesperson, was wonderful because we got to keep going. If it doesn't, then you have to try something else. But so what we did next is looked at some other details. So this is a next round of the study. So we did the first time. We just saw that the markets lifted. We did another round of the study. And what we did this time is we really wanted to look at pre and post. It was a new variable that we had for this run, and we took a look to say, okay, what was the website visitation change over the previous year? So they're doing great already. The growth rate for the company in non-TrueView markets was 35%, and our TrueView markets, like our direct flight markets, they were growing at 38% year over year in website visitation, which was great. During the advertising period, so we actually clearly defined when we made the TrueView investment, we saw the numbers jump pretty dramatically. And like the research department at Google did, questioned what we were controlling for to show whether or not it actually had the impact we thought. We then checked to see what happened as soon as we turned it off. And how did that change? To try to get another layer and another angle. Does this actually have an impact? And how long does the impact last? So they loved, you'll notice the color change. It looks very non-primary color. That's Google style all the time. But some of you are like, I have decks in my inbox right now loaded with primary colors. This is a little agency too called Net Conversion out of Orlando. It was 8 people at the time. I mean, we're not, again, this is all things very much inside of our control, but a little firm that did this. And so what we looked at here is we saw it drop a little bit, but we saw the numbers stay higher, which was something that we really liked. So we saw, even though we made an impact, that we saw a higher growth rate coming out of for the entire website following that, following the advertised period. And from there, we looked at, okay, what's next? I mean, what are the other variables that come into a campaign? So we started another campaign, and we ran again, and we switched up, and we started testing creative. And started looking at different creative options. So we'd really established in the company right now, kind of at this point, this media is working. This media is doing exactly what we want it to do. But now what can we do to start making it more effective for us? And so the next thing we went to was creative. Traditionally, Net Conversion has, our Nassau Paradise Island has a messaging that if you go to the Bahamas, you'll get, the actual promotion board will send you a $300 voucher just for going. Just $300 cash. Honestly, to get some of these slides, I said I'd say it multiple times. If you just fly to Nassau right now, they'll give you $300 in cash. So that's their traditional offer. It's kind of how it works, comes right out of their marketing budget, and that's how it's defined. But one of the things, based on how they do their budgeting, sending out these rebates to people, is they'd like to know, what if I didn't have to give as much cash and I could just use more of it towards media? Would that help? How would this change if, to this point, we'd only ever given offer messaging? We'd only ever done the 300. We kind of only thought it would work unless we had a nice offer attached to it. What if we just did branding messaging? What if we just told the story of the island and told the story of the personality and told the story of all the things there are to do there? So let's try that. And so we ran, for a while, we ran TrueView messaging in some markets, and in some other markets we ran brand messaging to try to see the changes. And you can see that the lift was about the same. It was about a 13-point lift based on where we started in non-TrueView markets and where we ended up. And so based off of that insight and based off of that analysis, not only did they change, whether or not they could run video during these peak offer seasons, but they also rolled back the offer a little bit and picked up more marketing budget because they were seeing that they were still getting very similar responses from people based on whether or not they had the offer immediately attached to it. And so that changed part of it. So that was the next step and kind of the next evolution. And then we moved to a new idea. So you remember when we first put it up, we just identified the direct flight markets. And I mentioned that Richmond doesn't have a direct flight anywhere. And now you're like, I'm reliving this presentation. One of the things we talked about is they're out of Orlando. They had a direct flight, and they were talking about how that worked. But, a lot of parts of the country don't have direct flights. I'm sure a lot of us grew up in places where if you went on a family vacation, you were always flying twice. It wasn't even something that you really considered. And so that was the next kind of insight that we had was, look, just because we don't have a direct flight doesn't mean that these people wouldn't just, fly to the hub and then fly to the destination. So we opened it up nationally. We took it outside of just the campaigns. We had to pick up budget a little bit. If you're going to target that many people to have some impact, you probably need to pick up budget. But at this point in time, we'd proven the messaging worked. We'd proven that the media had worked. And so we felt good about it, and we opened it up nationally. And so these are the results from the national campaign. We saw a massive, massive, massive lift during the advertised period. The national campaigns were running at about 8% year-over-year growth. And then we launched this, and we saw 52% year-over-year growth for the whole website across the entire country. Huge, huge change. And this goes back to the same idea as the targeting broad and targeting everybody. And then also and recognizing that there's big parts of our demographics that we don't normally reach. This opened up, traditionally when we buy media, we buy TV or we buy magazines, we have to kind of buy in chunks. That also applies to the country. Sometimes it's regional chunks. And when if we don't give people the opportunity in other places to see it, there might be huge pockets that are open. In travel, everyone targets New York City because most of everyone's travelers come from New York City. That's because most people live in New York City. That doesn't mean that that's where the most passion for your product is, or the most passion for what you're offering. So this is another thing that we found as well that opened up. So now we're fully national. Because if we're gonna give people the choice, and people in Bend, Oregon don't care about Nassau Paradise Island, then they don't have to watch. And it works perfectly for how the brand can interact. But I know people in Bend, Oregon, and they wish they were in the Bahamas all the time. But the other thing too, and again, the learnings from earlier studies never go away. At this point in time, so we're now actually, I think in 2012, and then we're, fortunately because of these dates, but the other thing they tracked, and it's hard to see here, is we actually followed when did we launch and when did it end. So we kept some of the other pieces that we had learned earlier. We wanted to see that during the time period it increased, that it was attributed to it, and afterwards, did it drop down, but did we still hold more of a lift from the study? Same ideas, keep reinforcing them, but it was creative, kind of their creative analytics that allowed us to get there. So then, ironically enough, Google finally caught up to Nassau Paradise Island. We were chasing them for quite a while. They were breaking our products on the regular. Trying, at one point in time, I had to tell them that they had too many ads and that Google AdWords for video couldn't support that. That was an internal conversation. Listen, that was funny. Guys, this is Nassau, all right? You want this to be a big bet for Google? We want to continue to talk about this all the time. You want it to be on the front of the Wall Street Journal. How about we build it so Nassau, it doesn't break for Nassau? But this is how fast we go. So we added some new things, and we continued to evolve brand measurement, and continued to evolve website visitation. And we kept doing the same things we did before, but we added some stuff. One of the first things that we did was add recall. I think we talked about that a little bit before. But what we added in addition was basically saying we have the ability now to see who saw the video, who was served the video, who actually took the time to watch the whole thing, and then who never saw it, or skipped it. And we have the ability to break into different groups. And then what we did is push surveys to those people. And the first thing that we went after was ad recall. Do you remember seeing it? This number can be sometimes depressing for marketers. Sometimes the number is really low, really low. But honestly, if we were sitting watching TV right now and there was a commercial break and I asked you to name the 3 commercials you just saw, the chances wouldn't be good. Actually, there were just 3 commercials. Does anyone remember the 3 I just put up? See what I mean? None of you even remember any of the commercials that I just had up here. But we did ad recall, and what we saw is 26% higher recall for people who had been served the video. And that doesn't necessarily mean they even watched the whole thing, which was pretty promising as well. And so we saw the higher recall, but what we really liked is we liked the number out of there that we saw where frequency was making a big impact. The people who we knew were only served at one time didn't have near the lift that the people who saw it multiple times. And that was really promising because it means that while it was harder to find out whether or not this worked once, if we did it multiple times, we could actually start to see a much bigger impact and a statistical change. And so that evolved. The next was brand awareness. We did the same thing, very similar concept as we pushed out videos, did a brand awareness study, and basically asked which one of these brands do you recognize? And had people do surveying both in the control group and both outside of the control group to get an idea of how many people did recognize. Now for Nassau Paradise Island, this is actually one of the harder things that I've seen in marketing. Nassau Paradise Island is one island in the Bahamas. So it is competing in some of these questions against the Bahamas. It technically is the Bahamas. I mean, that is, it's a tough game for them to handle from a branding perspective. And I'm sure we all have like some subtleties that maybe we're under a bigger umbrella. There's bigger companies that are better recognized, but it's a very difficult play, especially when they're competing with someone that they're actually kind of partners with. And so they're doing the same thing, did the same surveys. We saw brand awareness up 10% just in 3 weeks off people who saw the video, which is a great indication that people were accepting the messaging, listening and taking it and recognizing that Nassau Paradise Island was its own thing. And the next is brand interest. And this is one of my favorites, which is organic search activity. People who were served this ad and saw videos and we know watched them were 300% more likely to search Nassau Paradise Island than people who had not. And it's one of the things about kind of digital video, about how this environment is changing that we haven't really had in the past. TV happens and then we just kind of watch how the marketplace changes. But in this change, we actually can watch and see, hey, the business goal is to get people to take a lead, to look for a hotel, to actually come to our website and to learn more information. And so this proves immediately this kind of stuff is happening, that this is effective for us. And so that's a great start. I mean, we continue to build off of that, and we've continued to see some of this data drive new learnings and new changes. Because again, this is a process, and this isn't all the way where they want to be, so we're going to continue to evolve it. So I want to share this. This is a little hard to see, but I'll walk us through it. This is compete data for all of the major destinations in the Caribbean. You have Bermuda, Turks and Caicos, Aruba, Jamaica, Virgin Islands, Puerto Rico, list all of them. And this goes back to 2011, July 2011, about the time when we started. We've actually started a little closer to May. But the dark blue line, at this point in time, one of the two that you can actually see, Nassau Paradise Island in 2011 was the 3rd most visited of all of the Caribbean destinations. Not surprisingly, it was beat by the Bahamas and was kind of trying to work its way above that, but Jamaica and the Bahamas, staples, it's probably the first 2 places anyone thinks of when they think of the Caribbean. I mean, those are the staples of the industry. So what we look at is from July 2011, you'll see through almost all of 2013, every single month, it is now the most visited destination in the Caribbean. It is number 1. And so this goes through 2013. And 2014 so far, they're the only one that is growing except for Turks and Caicos. This entire market is shrinking at about 10 to 15%. And they are the only ones that is actively growing. So not only are they fighting the entire industry, they're actually jumping above. So the gap between these is massive. And it evolves from investing in the brand. And so it's one of the things too that we have to think about for marketers. And my entire marketing background is direct response. I even started in retail, which is like, you figure out a way to sell that sweatshirt for $16. And if you don't, it is, you're trying to sell, one of the companies I worked on was Parts Express. You are literally selling widgets. Literally, there's a place that does sell widgets. It's not hypothetical. And you were selling them for $4.96, and you better get inside of that. But that's completely how I've ever done it. I was no branding whatsoever. In fact, the CEO of RKG never talks about branding, which is where I started. And so this, to me, though, is the best indication for, like, while we have 6-month targets and we have 6-month goals and we have things we have to immediately turn around, we want to know exactly what we're getting for our investment. And then I see this. And this isn't because they were running paid search. Every one of these guys is running paid search. It's because they made an investment and continue to evolve and build on something that they saw was working really well, that was affecting their brand and making sure it was delivering the results that they wanted, people coming and finding more information. And sometimes you do have to put a chart up that looks 3 years back to show the power that it's had, but it's been tremendous for them and continues to be tremendous for them. So with kind of that evolution, everything else is going to work, is going to work a little bit better and work a little stronger. So the next evolution, the evolution that we're on right now, is a lot of us have conversions, right? We have numbers that we have to hit. And so a lot of this, like, brand visitation is wonderful, John, but get to the, my company goal is to sell something. Sometimes that can be, admittedly, on digital video and, television, sometimes it's hard to track. Sometimes it's hard to show exactly what happened and what the numbers are. But we knew that that was a goal. We wanted to see that people were taking referrals and going to the resorts and hotels that were in the Caribbean. So what we did is looked at total site visitation. We didn't just look at the number of people who were hitting in that one market and just based off of cookies that were going through YouTube. We didn't look at just those numbers because, again, the idea of this is that you're going to get more searches, more organic lifts. You're going to see the entire market lift up. And the entire time since we've been bought into that concept, that's what we've been focused on. Is the market changing? And are we doing something to impact that? So we looked at the entire market and looked at all of the visitation, say for like the Orlando market, one of our direct flight markets. And with that entire visitation, we saw about 50% year-over-year growth. But what we saw is that we saw conversion rate rolled back about 8%. So kind of trying to figure out what the quality of the traffic was. But when you do the math, the change off is pretty good. They saw conversion rates by market, our total conversions by market, up somewhere between 33 and 56% for most of their target markets. They saw the total site traffic grow. And what was the site conversion rate? Because we wanted to see that this branding was having an impact. Honestly, something like a video or even a television commercial, you see it and you tell someone else about it, we're not picking that up. And we're losing in a lot of the cookies. And honestly, a lot of the YouTube cooking right now is, it's evolving. But we're seeing, we want to see that our brand message is getting around, and sometimes brand messages are about sharing. And we put it onto a social site like YouTube, which means we want to see lifts outside of the people who immediately saw our video. And so this is what we tracked. Are we seeing a lift in the markets that we wanted? And are we seeing conversions? Again, one more step closer to the real goal. And we were, which is exactly what we were hoping to see. But not something that we didn't get to until maybe a year and a half in, until we had really figured out a way to hone everything else that we were doing. So that's probably the most recent spot. That's where we are right now. We continually do all the things that you've seen to this point. We do all the Google surveys. We try to do the Google surveys. We try to do brand lift. Sometimes when we can't do brand lift, we do other things like pull actual search queries. Our Google team pulls search queries in different markets to try to see if we're seeing any search behavioral changes ourselves. Manually do it. Again, we're trying to be creative when sometimes the tools that exist right now don't do it for us. So what's happening next for these guys? Well, it's definitely a continued evolution and a continued change. We have the idea right now about what's happening with conversions, but one thing that was missing that we haven't really hit on yet or figured out what it's doing is how does this change by device? We have some of these campaigns where mobile and desktop some were separated, but we haven't really taken the time to do any analysis to see if there's behavioral changes or if something is kind of shifting and something's going to be different or people will behave differently or just having a different effect. And so we haven't looked into that. We've never done any analysis to see how it affects Google Analytics on mobile traffic on the mobile site. Not something that we've looked into to this point. So that's on the agenda next. And then a lot of it's product evolution. So Google is releasing, or at least has tested some different products, but one of the products that they released was, a card on your video that had more interactivity. And all the videos are kind of picking up more interactivity. And you'll probably see them roll out. And I'm sure we'll knock down your door to tell you about them. But that interactivity is kind of the next step. What if that offer was put in, but in a way that was much more accessible to the user than just tagging it into the end of the creative? And it was actually something that we could interact with and see how that evolves and see what ways we can connect it. And if we can take people to different parts of the site based on whatever's resonating with them in the creative. So that's generally what we're on next. That'll probably take us a few months, and we'll be on to new things and continuing to evolve it and see what happens next, because it ties back, and hopefully you guys kind of bought into these three things, but it ties back to the same three things. We always keep our eye on the real goals. We finally got it kind of down to conversions and seeing what's happening in conversions, but we want to see people our brand advertising and our direct response advertising. We want to see people taking steps towards what our ultimate goals are as marketers. So we'll continue to use that and then see what products come out and see if it fits with those goals. Continue to be kind of just recognize that this is a process. That it is not laid out clearly at this point in time, but it is a marketing process, which, as marketers, for a lot of us, that gets us excited about what we can do. And then continue to be creative and analytics. A lot of this stuff came from our team. A lot of this stuff came from the agency. Some of it came from, just clients asking questions. Well, could we see this? Or how could we change that? And sometimes the answer is, no, we can't see exactly what you want, but we could try to get at that by doing something else. Continuing to be creative and how we look at it, how we measure it until this continues to grow and evolve. So if anyone has any questions, any thoughts? Yeah. Almost all repurposed. Almost all repurposed. We got a couple. Oh, yeah, sure. Was it, the question was it specifically for broadcast, or was it specifically for TrueView, or was it repurposed broadcast? It was almost all repurposed. It would be great, and that could be one of the things we've talked about as being next. It could be great if it's separate, but honestly, production is expensive. And so we, in the early stages, when we did the first test, all we had was broadcast. And so we ran broadcast and it was successful. And so we thought, what if we just, instead of spending more on production, we spend it on broadcast. So if you have the budget to allow you to be, to try both, then I think that would be great. The video? I can do my best. We can see if I can pull it up here. Sure, do you guys want to? You'll get it for me? No problem. Yeah.
The decision to go nationally, was it driven by just pure volume, or was it efficiency?
A little bit of both, honestly. I think after the team had kind of bought into the idea to run broad in the geos that they wanted demographically, then it was a much easier kind of jump for them to say, okay, let's apply the same logic to going nationally. If they're people, while our visitor logs say that only 1.5% of people came from Kentucky came down to the Bahamas last year, wouldn't it be great if we could actually still run to the 1.5% of people without having to buy all of Kentucky? Does that make sense? It's a little confusing. Hopefully giving the choice for them to do that. Yeah. Yeah, how many videos did we run? So some of the markets had specific creative, but it was the first 25 seconds was exactly the same. It was things like Delta offers, an additional voucher out of Atlanta, or JetBlue is now flying nonstop out of Hartford. That was really the only difference for a lot of them. I'd say in terms of creative iterations over time, it's probably been 9 or 10 or 12, but it's only been creative iterations because that's their broadcast. TV was changing over 2 years. So most everything else was the same. One of the other things that was a good question too, because I forgot to mention this, there has been an evolution into trying to use some more creative around specific types of visitation. So like they have some wedding materials that they use a lot for the Nassau, and so we've started targeting weddings specifically. And that won't be something that we'll run on broad targeting. That's just like we're trying to hit the wedding market. We had good video for that, and so they put something together, cut it, and we target the wedding market with that video. At this point, it's all on the same YouTube channel. One thing I will say is that if you visit their YouTube channel, is NPI Bahamas. It's their YouTube channel. You won't see a lot of the ads. In fact, did we get it? Yeah, we can run it. This is 99% the same as an ad, but is not, because of the offers that are unique to different markets. They don't post all of their ads on their website.
If you're a beach lover, it's definitely better in the Bahamas. And we've got your number. It's 17. That's how many beaches there are in Nassau Paradise Island. Sleepy beaches that define the word getaway. Broad beaches charged with the energy of oceanfront resorts. And one continuous strand of beach that runs for 3 miles. And every one of them is caressed by our warm, legendary, crystal clear turquoise waters. Immersed in this dreamland, you'll wonder which is the brightest white, the sands of the beaches, or the fluffy clouds above. And which is the deeper blue, the turquoise water, or the azure sky. And once all those cares and worries have melted away, you'll wonder, does it really matter? Why not book your vacation today at NassauParadiseIsland.com?
Now, I asked the CEO every time I visited if I could be in one of these ads. I'd happily walk down the beach. If you need me to lay in the hammock with someone, you just tell me. You tell me what you need. Google is a partner, right? We need however you need us to help out, we can. Yeah. Sure, we'll get both of them.
So I have competitors. So I think one of the things that
Yeah, absolutely.
have you experienced that?
So here's two parts. The first part is in that market, the one we identified, most of the other people on there are government organizations. Nassau Paradise Island is the only private one, and Caribbean governments are not famous for their ability to get their act together. So we have seen the beginnings of it. Yeah, exactly. We have seen the very beginnings of it, but mostly driven by a couple agencies who have bought into what's happened. But the Caribbean's really slow. I will tell the story, and I can tell this because it's a case study. Travel Oklahoma, just one of your state ones, competing against the Californias. And Michigan actually has a monster tourism operation. Yeah, so one of the biggest. Travel Oklahoma went all in. They kind of took this a little bit and they said, we're going to do it. And they didn't go through the process nearly as much. They were like, no, we're going to do it. And they went heavy in the main travel season 2 years ago. They saw, in markets that they never advertised in before, they took that learning from Nassau and said, in markets we've never advertised before, they were up 400% year over year in visitation. And markets that they had bought television in the past, because they could really only afford to buy television in about 6 markets. And markets that they bought television in the past, they grew about 130%. They also blended television. They ran TV only campaigns because, again, controls in your marketing show whether it's working. TV only, they'd been buying for the last couple of years, went up 11%. It was like a significantly smaller number. Adding the digital video component changed it. Control market across the United States, they were growing at about 30%, where they weren't putting any marketing in. So they saw a massive lift, enough that for the month of May, which is a massive travel planning time period, they were the most visited state board website in the United States. Oklahoma. We are talking Oklahoma. And you know what? When I talk to them, I'd say, guys, we're Oklahoma. And they say, we know, but we're winning. So some people have definitely caught on. That caught the attention of the United States, right? When there's a lot of ego. Everyone has ego in their businesses, right? But a lot of ego on these like state boards of tourism. And when Oklahoma is kicking your ass, they came after that. So definitely an evolution, and something that we'll probably be doing for Nassau too, the evolution of trying to blend television with video and looking at how markets change and markets lift with television involved.
conversations with NASA about that TV? What kind of data are they requiring to get?
Yeah, absolutely. So for how we are starting to have conversations around television and video, they were doing a little bit of it on their own, right? They were just kind of keeping an eye on it, and we didn't really know what was going on. But the more they opened it up to us, the more we could create some of these blended kind of mixes in terms of like where we ran media. Oklahoma told us everything about their TV buy. And it just opened up so many opportunities for our team to get involved. I mean, if you work with I assume you all do, and most of them are in the room, so they'd look at me funny if I said otherwise. If you work with like a really good Google team, people will be invested in not just trying to like sell some new thing, but trying to figure out a way that this will actually show good lift and good impact. And if you set the goals, set like the KPIs for campaigns in the beginning, then everyone's held accountable to it. It's not just someone hard selling something else. So they gave us the whole video, gave us the whole buy, when it was happening, what markets it was happening in, and that allowed us to kind of build a YouTube campaign that evolved specifically around how they were buying television. Yeah.
I apologize for already mentioned this. Attribute someone who watched.
It's a great question. The beginnings of that are in terms of actual measurement. Oh yeah, I'm sorry. Were we able to attribute someone who watched a video all the way down to the direct conversion? Could we follow that specifically? The beginning tools that was available to us doesn't even come close to allowing us to really get good at that. And a lot of the times what we talked about was that this was going to be a brand that it started as just a branding play with an idea towards getting people to take a step towards conversions. So like television, there's literally no way for us to track that. So we were kind of keeping it in the same vein, but we did want to show progress towards that. We're getting closer to being able to do that, but it's kind of I think it's up to the team a little bit how you want to feel about it. My feelings are that it's maybe not even the best fit to do that. I'd like to know the number to see if we could directly attribute, but the idea of video, the shareability, what we're trying to do with it won't always show up in that situation. And so it's kind of a mix. That's why I liked the lift and seeing the market changing because of branding investment. But it's yes and no. Evolving. Google Analytics is getting much, much better at it. For a while, Google Analytics didn't even talk very well to YouTube, but they made that a priority over like 2012. And now it's a much stronger situation. So hopefully even better. Good question. Anything else? Any other thoughts, questions? Okay. All right. Well, thank you guys very much. I appreciate coming up and being here.
Thanks, John. So comfort and chaos, that was a theme that I thought was really interesting and strong, and a lot of the things that we talk about with you guys on a daily basis require that comfort in chaos attitude. I'm not going to say we at Google live in chaos every day, because we don't, but with the sheer volume of new products, new reporting capabilities that we experience on a daily basis, there's a certain degree of chaos. We know that you're hearing about all of these things from us while you're also hearing about it from a number of other partners. So if anything we experience on a daily basis, you're experiencing times X in addition to trying to meet your goals. But we're living it too. So think of us as a partner who's experiencing a lot of the same things you are. Okay, so we're able to lean on each other to find comfort in chaos. And for those of us in the room who are bold, and I'm going to paraphrase John a little bit here, but who are willing to do something that we know is going to work, but we don't know when or how. If we're willing to go down that path together, like the NASA folks were with John, we'll dig in just as deep in all of the testing and data and experimentation that you have an appetite for. We're going to take a break in a minute, and then we're going to come back for Neil Hoyne. You have to come back for Neil Hoyne because he will teach you things, okay? He's got a point of view on a topic that we believe is incredibly important that we just don't get deep enough into analytics, attribution, really understanding what the value of our marketing is. And he's really good at it. Okay, and he's been really good at it for a long time. But we will take a break. You know, as soon as we'll probably take 15 minutes as soon as I let you go. So that, let's say, roughly 11:05. Bathrooms, food, a giveaway. Okay, a question within. Okay, changing questions. It took TV 13 years to accrue its first 50 million users. How many years did it take the internet? Took TV 13 years to accrue its first 50 million users. Just raise your hand and guess something. Okay.
4.
No. Yes. 1 week.
20 years.
There you go, 5 years. Okay. Took the internet 5 years to accrue its first 50 million. So in terms of adoption, ongoing adoption, the fastest growing form of media known to man to date. You also receive a Chromecast, excuse me, not Comcast. I love them. I love Chromecast better. Okay. Snacks, food, 11:05. We've got Neil, and then we have lunch, and then we have speed dating, and we have a really good prize for someone who can answer a question in about 50 minutes. So the one other thing I'd like to, two things, remind you of. One, if there is someone from another organization here, the organization's name of which you saw on a slide earlier, and you'd like an introduction, ask your Google team partner member to introduce you to them if you'd like. At least one person said they'd like to talk to John a little bit more. We can't guarantee that we can make him available to everybody because he's got another job in another vertical. But if anyone's interested in talking to him a little bit more, maybe I can grab him to come back for 15 or 20 minutes during lunch. So our next speaker is Neil Hoyne. So I maybe Neil's embarrassed, maybe he isn't. I sound like a little too much of a fanboy, but I'm just going to tell you, I learn a lot from him every time I see him speak. I'm going to really sit down and take some notes. Neil's the head of customer analytics. He's got over 15 years of experience in marketing analytics. And at Google, he oversees our efforts to bring advertisers insights into the customer journey as the head of analytics. Since the program's inception here in 2011, he's worked directly with many of the world's largest brands to challenge conventional measurements practices through new applications of digital attribution and the customer lifetime value. He's the inventor of nearly a dozen patents in the space, so he knows what he's talking about. He's a speaker across the industry on a regular basis. He was just speaking at an event in New York yesterday, correct? Yep. So we're glad that he swung by Chicago, his hometown, on the way back to California. And he also, he has an MBA from UCLA. Is that correct? That is correct. So here's Neil. Listen up and enjoy. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Let's see. Microphone, good. Volume, higher. Just yell, project. People in the back. Okay, good. But this is kind of awkward. If you see me standing like in the middle here, it's like if you stand here, it's like you're looking directly into the sun, which is the same thing that happened yesterday. Is that I got on stage and I was looking at different speakers. I'm like, no one's actually looking out the audience. We have about 500 people there, and everyone's looking amongst themselves. I'm like, what's going on? And then you get up there and you just have like 4 big spotlights on you, so you can't actually see anybody else. It's just entirely dark. But I like engaging with audiences. So over the course of this presentation, so we have about an hour for discussing measurement, which is right before lunch. You know, people get hungry and you start talking about something really deep. But so we're going to try to keep this interactive. So any questions you have as we're going through, we're going to try to have time at the end for Q&A. But as we're going through things, if there's something you want to know, if there's a curiosity you have, or you're looking at a feature and you're like, how does this work, or what do we do? Just interrupt me. Raise your hand. Let me know. A lot of these slides build, so oftentimes we're going to tell that story, and we're usually going to answer those questions that try to get good to say, well, what do people want to know, and then progress into it.
But if there's something you really want to know about how it applies to your business, or something you want to try, or something you've already done, let me know. And that way we can keep it interactive, we can keep it more fun, you'll get more out of it. But we are talking about measurement. And the thing about measurement, so from the Google side, we have the reputation of becoming really, really good with data and what we can do, right? And when we think about data, we usually think about these types of metrics behind me. And this is meant to be confusing because there's really a lot of different data points that we have. So when you look at a tool like Google Analytics, about 100,000 different reports you can run, and that's just one tool. So we work with some advertisers that have 12, 13, 14 different systems, all giving them different numbers and metrics. And you think about how long you would have to spend with just to look at all the data in one of those, right? I mean, that is a lot of information. So we often ask ourselves, well, what are people doing with these different data points? What are they finding value from? And this is a number. This is actually kind of a scary number. But what we find out is not a lot. Not a lot of decisions are actually being influenced by data. 6% of marketing decisions from data. Now, so it could probably come as no surprise if you think about it. We don't like to admit it. How do we make most of our marketing decisions? Entirely by how we feel. The same survey, the same study, we can send over the one-sheeter on this. About 54, 56% of decisions made entirely how we feel and what we think, intuition and gut feeling versus what the data actually shows. Now, this is a sad number, and a lot of companies would get discouraged by this number. But it actually shows us how much opportunity we have. So if we can make slightly better decisions, how much could we actually change our business? Now, an interesting thing, just to put this into perspective as well, some companies get discouraged by it. You may think of internal systems and how you'd like to be more data-driven. You think about silos of your individual cultures. You think about how everyone respects data, but nobody actually moves on it. So we see oftentimes conflicts between agencies and companies, conflicts between search, display, mobile, online, offline. So here's a story. A couple weeks ago, I actually met with an advertiser who generally, they're a large retailer. If I were to bring up their name to you, you would recognize them. You probably buy from them. And they are generally regarded as being the most data-centric retailer in the world. And I was excited to meet with them because I'm like, this is a company that has their shit together. They know exactly what they're doing. They know exactly how to measure. This 6% number doesn't apply to them. I sat with their search team. I'm like, how do you guys make decisions? I'm like, we can learn from each other. And they told me they kind of put their head down. They're like, well, you know, our company is really data-centric, but we really don't get as much out of data as we thought. I'm like, so what do you do? And some of their practices are things that we swore off 2-3 years ago. And I'm like, well, how come you haven't moved? They're like, because these things take time. And what I learned was that those companies that are generally perceive themselves to be ahead of the game, it's not that they're actually doing groundbreaking things, but they look at this as more of a journey, something where they have to build core competencies in, that they want to learn, that they want to understand, that they want to evolve their business through. Whereas other companies, sometimes they get down on themselves. They say, we're behind in the game, so we need to quickly solve this problem. We need to get a consultancy team in here. We need to buy a whole bunch of new products. We just need to nail this. So it's the idea of whether it's going to be a marathon, which we believe it is, where it's going to take time to build these competencies in measurement, versus a sprint where you're going to run and install one tool or one report and it's going to fix everything. But everyone's really starting in the same place right now. No one's really that far behind. No one is really that far ahead. But over the next couple of years, that will separate. So just keep that into context as we go through. The other thing to note is as we go through this presentation, there will be a lot of ideas. So I think probably about 60 or 70 different ideas and products and features. So keep in mind that some of these rely on Google Analytics. Some of you may use Google Analytics as it's a free product. Some of you may not. You may rely on Omniture, Core Metrics, Web Trends, all wonderful tools. You don't have to be using Google Analytics. Use a tool that you have in your business that you're comfortable with. Just make sure you understand the concepts behind this so that you can apply it to the measurement tools that your company needs. All right? Nothing's more painful than ripping out a measurement system and putting a new one in and then waiting about 3 to 6 months until you have data that you can use. So use what you have. So keep in mind the concepts are more important than the actual tools and the execution. The second thing is that not all of these ideas will apply to everybody. Right? You know, this isn't a prescriptive list where you have to follow step A, B, C, and D. Pick those ideas that are most relevant to your business, those problems that you want to solve, those opportunities that you see, and then we'll show you how our products can help you get some better answers to those. Make sense? Any questions so far? Sound like fun? All right, we'll try to make it fun. So before we go too far into all this, when we start talking about this whole data idea, it's useful to go back to where we actually came from. and where measurement started. So with measurement, back about 15 years ago, 16 years ago, when some of the measurement solutions got started, we used to measure everything entirely by volume. And so what's volume mean? So I actually have a picture up here. How many of you remember these things? Look familiar? Some people are giggling. There's going to become a point where no one's going to remember these things and I'm going to feel really old. But for now, at least, people still remember these. Right? This is where measurement started. These were hit counters. They were on the bottom of every single page, and everyone was really excited when their numbers went up. Like this was the totality of web measurement, where people go on the bottom. And if you don't believe me, there's actually a press release I like bringing up. This press release is still online. For those of you that have laptops open, if you search for it's the Dole Kemp 96 presidential campaign, you will actually find, if you go into the news press release section, you will find two press releases. One that they launched their website. The other one is to how successful their website was. And this is a quote from it. So at that point, they measured 762,000 hits. Right? It's not that 760,000. It's actually not that large of a number. But the interesting thing afterwards is that they put that it was the web standard of measurement. So as much as we try to forget that this era of measurement actually existed, it did. And that's how we used to measure progress, because we used to say that, people coming to our site and engaging with our properties, how could this be a bad thing? Right? More people. Eventually, some are going to do what we want them to do. Maybe in this case, they became voters. Maybe they registered to vote. Maybe they voted for him. Maybe not enough. But that's the way we used to measure it. Now, if somebody came into your office and said, and you asked them, like they're interviewing for a role, and you said, well, how are you going to measure our performance? And they said hits, you'd kind of laugh them out of the office. You said, really? We've gotten better than this. We're not simply going to track volume. But then we often realize that the more things change, the more they stay the same. So take things like social media, for example. Right? Vast majority of marketers are just using the total number of followers, friends, and likes as a measure of their social media success. The exact same thing that we swore off with hit counters, we're going back to with social media. Why? Because we don't know how to draw those connections between what's actually happening. We see people engaging with different elements of our site. We see people sharing and liking. How do we know what that's actually contributing to? Well, we don't. And that leads to silos where you have a social media team that will claim and say, look at all these, more or less, these new age hits that we were able to get. We don't know exactly what they're driving. And then for other teams, they have a different thing where you're saying, well, someone clicked on my search ad and they bought. How is that the same as someone that simply shared something with their friend? How do we remedy that? And the ultimate test that I like to use for these types of things is whenever you can buy something for a really, really low price. In this case, the going rate right now, I think it's actually about 6,000. Guess how much it costs for about 6,000 Twitter followers? About $5. So if you go to a website, there's fiverr.com. You can actually get 5, 10, 20,000 Twitter followers for $5. Right? And you think about this, if you launch this would be the best performing social media campaign you could ever have. I mean, think about it. You could double it, make it, you can get 40,000 followers for $10. Imagine you can spend $100. And now people will come back and they'll say, well, these aren't really good followers, and they're not. But how are you tracking the value of the followers you already have? Right? Is it just the source that it came from, the person that was behind generating them? So you need that connection to an ROI. So that's why measurement, at least apart from social, actually evolved to actually tracking things by conversion. Right? By people that were actually doing something and taking an action on the site. Something that was meaningful to the business, right? Now, whether that's someone filling out a lead form or someone making an appointment or someone buying a product, really the central point of it is that we want to track everything that's related to people spending money. Right? That's what we really care about. And creating an account, becoming a customer, these are all valuable things, but this is really what we want to track. We're saying we don't care if more people are coming to our website. We don't care if we have more hits. We don't care if we have more followers. The question is, did it actually give us any more money? Now, this has been the model since those hits really dissipated about 10, 12 years ago. Oddly enough, the gentleman that built conversion tracking for Google still works. He actually is now on the Google Analytics team. And I talked to him about it. I said, wow, when you came up with conversions, that must have been huge to the business. And actually, he kind of chuckled. He's like, well, to be honest, nobody actually thought that they would work because that's not how anybody actually measured. Like we were selling everything based on volume. And I came up with this project on conversion. So you hear about things like Google 20% time. That's actually for a couple months after we launched conversion tracking. That's what it was. It was one engineer sitting there saying, I know eventually this is going to be worthwhile. So now we're looking to say, well, what comes next? What should we be investing in? What's the next opportunity that people need to see? And we actually start looking at some of the problems that we've run into with conversions. So take this from the education side. I love this example. That we actually found out that leads, so most education providers, they will track by cost per lead. We find out that most prospective students actually fill out 3 to 4 lead forms before they decide what school they're going to go to. Which means that for some programs, if you assume that that's distributed linearly, it means that about 75, 80% of the lead information that they're getting, what they're optimizing on, is never actually translated into revenue. People that went elsewhere were lost leads. Then you have a question like mobile. Mobile doesn't convert as well as desktop. About 10% of the conversion rate of what we see. But we know everyone's on mobile. Everyone here probably has a cell phone, right? Now, if you left your cell phone at your office, your hotel room, your home this morning, you probably feel empty, naked without it, disconnected from the world. But then we go back and we say, well, how do we invest in mobile? It's like, well, no one's buying. Well, what are people doing? How do we judge that? How do we understand that performance and how do we track it? And then the other issue is, what if there are signals in measurement that are affecting the long-term health of the business? So what if people buy a product, but then they're unhappy with it and never buy it again? We usually track conversions. We track that incremental order. What do we do about the support side? What if those customers never come back? Bain actually had an interesting statistic that said, over the course of 5 years, 50% of your customers will no longer be with you. You'll lose them. They're not coming back. The question is how quickly does your market need to grow in order for you to replace those? Because if you let those customers go and you just say, well, we're just going to focus on acquiring new customers all the time, well, that's a shrinking pie. How do you make sure you actually can understand? Conversions won't tell you that. They'll tell you when you get the order. It won't tell you what happened afterwards or how difficult it's going to be to bring in the next one. And what this all comes down to is when we're looking at these conversion paths, when we're looking at these stories, we only focus on those steps where people are actually trying to spend money. So if they're interacting with things, where they're thinking about a product, I'll tell you, on the retail side, we see usually 3 or 4 interactions until someone actually decides to make a purchase. On travel, 6 to 7. On that education example, that can go out 18 months. Buying a new car, 3, 4, 6 months. But nothing's ever tracked. Only that action to say someone clicked on this ad and then they did what I wanted. They converted. And then afterwards, we don't care as much. Now, what we like to compare this to, which seems to make sense, because we can talk about the theoretical models of marketing all day long, and it's really dry and it's really boring, but we try to put it into the context of individual personal relationships, right? So think about this for a moment. If you were to go out to a bar or club, and maybe someone wanted to meet someone, right? You want to get a date. Maybe you eventually want to get married. Would you walk up to that person and just immediately ask them to marry you? I mean, that's what you want. That's what you're measuring success by. Would you just walk up to them and say, hi, can I have your phone number? It wouldn't work very well, right? But the way the marketers would do it is you have 100 people in the bar, you just go up to one person, can I have your phone number? Nope, okay. They were in the wrong market. Clearly they shouldn't have been here. I'm going to go to the next person, right? And then when you run out of that bar, maybe you'll get 2 people that'll say yes, and you'll go celebrate with all your marketing-oriented friends because they're all doing the exact same thing. And then you're going to go to a different bar. Right? But then what happens? Right? In order to get more numbers, you have to go now to more bars. Maybe you go to the same bars over and over again, and you meet people, you've already asked them for their number once. Maybe they gave it to you. Maybe they're an existing, if you want to call it, customer. And then you're asking them the same thing. They're like, well, wait, I already know who you are. Yeah, we have a relationship. Oh, okay, well, I'm just treating you like everybody else because it's easier. You have to go to more places, more channels. It becomes more and more confusing. So if you put it within that context, the companies, the people, the strategies that really have success, first of all, if you have the strongest brand, right? So picture this being like celebrities or movie stars. They walk into a place, everybody knows who they are as soon as they walk in. All right, this is almost like Amazon for me. I will buy stuff from Amazon without looking anywhere else. Why? Because I know exactly when it will be delivered in front of my house. I know they have good customer support. Even if they're not the lowest price, I know it's easier for me, right? Now you have those companies that have a unique product. You're the only person that's selling a rocket-powered hang glider. People have to buy from you. Thing is, though, the internet's a big place. There's a lot of competitors, and if you build an awesome product, how many people are going to be lining up trying to copy your success, and how quickly are they going to do it? Right? Then you have consumers, they have more choices. They don't have to just buy from their local neighborhood. They can buy anywhere in the country, anywhere in the world, and have it shipped. Or, of course, and we never like to compare this to what the actual bar metaphor would be, but if you happen to have the lowest price, then people will also come to you. right? Because that's what some people are looking for. They don't care about the service. They don't care about the relationship. They just want the lowest price. These people will be successful in this strategy, right? We put this in a slightly different context, right? What we've seen is the evolution of people just going from traffic-centric measurement, drawing more people into the site, getting more people engaged, and what that engagement actually means, because it's a very fluid definition, to, okay, let's actually measure people that are doing things and what we want. Now what we see a model emerging is a little bit different, which is actually focusing on individual customers. So going through and to say, okay, how do I build and develop those relationships? How do I get people to buy not just once, but to come back over time? How do I recognize if there's a problem with that relationship, and how do I respond and act to it? How do I get away from those stages where people are just saying, I'm spending money now, to going a little bit earlier to say, well, what are you looking for, and what products and services do we have to help? And then after they buy, how do we make sure you're happy, and how do we measure how many times you're coming back? So then we can go and track and say, well, how exactly do we find more people like you? Where should we be spending our time? Now, this is not to say that conversion-centric models will die, and there are actually some small businesses that still use a traffic-centric model, even though it's not hit counters. But those companies that are moving to a customer-centric model are seeing unique advantages. What we want to talk about is we want to talk about how our tools and how some of these strategies are coming together to really focus on driving better performance by individual customers. So we take it away from this realm of being purely theoretical, something that's really simple and really actionable. Like I said, we can build entire plans that take 18 to 24 months to execute. Only problem with that is that 18 to 24 months tends to be about the average tenure of a large company's CMO. When you try to introduce ambitious programs, they're like, well, I'm likely going to be out of here unless you can generate results quicker. Now, those companies that are able to make this transition, this is what's happening. They're realizing that they should be targeting the most valuable customers. Now, if you split your overall customer base, what you will find is a very small portion of the population that's spending a disproportionately large amount of money on you. We've seen it as high as about 14% of a customer base contributing 90% of revenue. Now, what happens, though, when you take an average of those types of things? Take an average, what you're going to be doing is overspending on a really large portion of your population and underspending on a really small, valuable portion of your population. So we want to understand this, but we also recognize that some companies are going out and saying, we want to find all these high-value customers, and we want to keep them close, and we want to keep them to ourselves. We'll let everybody else fight for the low-value customers. That's the impetus. That's the motivation as to why we work so hard at this. Now, the starting point of this, if we want to have relationships with customers, is to really start asking the right questions, right? So moving from that stage, say, how many orders did we receive? How many customers do we have? Now, that's an interesting question. Let's think about that for a moment on the customer side. Everyone here agrees, and you can raise your hand if you don't, that customers are important. Right? It's usually a good way. Ask people to get involved if they disagree. So now think about this for a moment. How would you define customers for your business? Now, for some of you, if you have a subscription offering where people buy month over month, that makes it easy. But if people buy at irregular intervals, is it someone that purchased from you once just because you captured their ordering information and you stored it maybe in a CRM system? Do they have to buy from you twice? Then you know it's intentional. Then they're actually on board. It wasn't a gift purchase or a spontaneous thing. Is it someone that hasn't purchased from you in the past 12 months? They get knocked off that list. It's actually a hard question for a lot of advertisers to answer. They all answered in different ways. The customers will usually think about acquiring information. So first is to think, well, just basically, who are those customers? Because you need to actually plant a flag somewhere to say, well, how are we actually going to measure these people? And then what you get to do is you get to move away from just looking at average CPAs to saying, out of those customers, how much did they actually cost to acquire? And how much did they spend? Now, this is different because when we look at cost, we look at marketing costs. We look at someone clicked on a paid search ad, and then they converted or didn't convert. What about all the other interactions that they had over time? Shouldn't they matter into the profitability of a customer? Shouldn't we look at how that combined with how much this customer spent over time? Why would we acquire a new customer and then only look at their first purchase if they're going to come back? How do we attribute that? And the other part of these questions, of course, is instead of looking at what traffic source had the best conversion rate, it's to look at really who are the most profitable customers and why are they the most profitable? What have they done that's so special? Now, we're going to help you answer some of this. The very first stage of this, after the questions, is then to figure out, well, can we build this story? And in fact, we can. We can actually piece together all these interactions. So instead of just being somebody clicking on an ad and then immediately converting or not converting, we can tell you what everybody did up until that point. And then we can tell you what everybody did afterwards. Now we can track this, looking just like we have here, people that spent money, but also what we talk about commonly, things like micro-conversions. So interactions to say, well, what led somebody up to filling out this form or engaging with this company in a certain way? We can actually measure this across. Now, what does this actually look like? This is a pretty slide. What does the report look like? This is actually what it looks like inside Google Analytics. It's very straightforward, but we just surface those customer stories. So what we have here is we will capture every interaction that customers have with your business over 90 days. We'll categorize it. So if somebody came in, you see on that second line, you see a direct and then direct. That means that there were 1,400 customers that eventually came through and purchased, and they came by going directly to the URL of the website and then going back to that URL again. You see organic search out there. You see referrals down the bottom, people that came from third-party sites. We can track paid search. We can track social media, display, even things that are not Google related. Someone comes in from Facebook, we're going to measure that click. Someone came in from Yahoo search engine, we're going to capture that as well. So 100% of those clicks, we're going to put in and we're going to build that story for you. But then we're going to go further. So with things like the display network, we can actually show you people that saw your ads but didn't click on them. We can tell you what creative they saw and how it changed their behavior afterwards. We can tell you people that saw your YouTube ad, but maybe they didn't click on that either. That's still a view. Maybe you weren't charged for it. Maybe it was true view. You didn't get charged for that ad at all. We can show you that this is someone that saw the ad. We can even tell you that they've never been to your site before, and then they came direct. Or maybe if you had a display ad and you pushed your brand really heavily, did that push them to actually search for your brand terms later on, which are lower cost? Did it maybe bring them directly to the website? Or if you introduced a product category or an idea, did that influence their search behavior later on? We can actually build this story now. 90 days, 5,000 interactions, clicks, impressions, YouTube, all in one place. Now, once we get that, we realize, well, wait a minute. If we have all this information, what about everything that's not happening online? Many of you have call centers, right? People interact over the phone. Well, how do you get that story together? So what we actually introduce is the ability to take any of these offline interactions that are happening and add that data as well. So whether it's a store visit or a phone call, sending someone a catalog, or anything else that they did offline to spend money, we can add that side by side. Now, one control pivot. It's not a perfect matching mechanism, so someone sees a TV ad and they convert. We're getting better at that. But if you can measure it, if you can identify who that customer is, we can build it into that story. So you know exactly what the relationship with that customer was up until the point where they contact you, what it took to get them to convert, and how to find similar people. What we can also do is, guess what? You'll see on the second column we mentioned conversions. Oh, conversions, we want to talk about customers. So how do we do that? Well, we actually can now add individual name tags to people. And the reason why I use this instead of a name is because we can't take in any personally identifiable information. That's out. So first names, last names, email addresses, requests. I bring it up because it was just kind of weird, was that a bank asked if they could do social security numbers. You cannot. Nothing personally identifiable. We're serious about that. We have to delete accounts because of it. But why we actually do this? So someone comes in, and there's different ways that they can identify themselves, right? They can obviously log in. They can make a purchase. That's them giving their name. We want them to be part of that process. We want to say, yes, I want to be known by this company. But they also can do it by things like clicking on an email. So the same way that we measure email open rates, right? We can do the same thing where someone clicks on a link, and then we can say, oh, we know exactly who this person is. We can identify them. When we do that, we can now then assign that name tag to that path. So that path is just not a random person came to our site and clicked on these paid search ads. We can now assign it to a record that ties to your CRM systems. Give it a first and last name. That's how you calculate how much they're spending and what their cost is. What we can also do is if you have information about your customers, things that are important to you understanding them, maybe they're a high or low value customer, maybe this is a segment you really want to grow. What we can do is we can take just a spreadsheet. We can do deeper system integration if we really want to. If we really want to tie it into Salesforce so everything goes automatically. But if you want to do something quick and easy that you could do in an hour, an afternoon, you can literally take a Google spreadsheet and you can drop it directly into our analytics tool with any other information that's important to you. So maybe you know how many times these customers have already purchased from you in the past, what their aggregate spend was. Maybe you have demographic information that you'd like to pair up with it. or the product categories they like to buy. You just put that in a column in the spreadsheet, you put that little identifier on the left-hand side, and then we will match it up one-to-one with you. And we'll be able to show you not only how those people behave on your website, we'll also be able to tell you where they came from, how they're interacting. And what we'll talk about later is you can actually go out and target based on that information one-to-one. There's a customer you really want to keep, a customer you really want to acquire, or a group of customers, you can identify them and go out and target them proactively. All because you identified them. Everything goes right through, which is useful. And what we can also do is, like, well, Google has a lot of data. Can we add any of our own stuff to this as well? And we definitely can. So once you get all these paths built, what we can then do on top of it is we say, you know what? We have a whole bunch of targeting information from the display network, right? Where we can infer what someone's age, or maybe what someone's gender, or other interest categories that they're in. We can add that to the stories as well. So that we can take your information, we can join it with our own. And then what we can also do, we release this product. This product is about a week old, right about a week old. Most people haven't heard about it. We don't make a lot of, we have so many products, we don't make a lot of noise about this. We actually introduced benchmarks. What we did was we took a group of people, we have about 10 million people who are on Google Analytics. We allow them to opt in to provide us with benchmarks so that we can actually take this information and to say, well, you know what, out of all these numbers I see, can you tell me whether this is good or bad? Like, am I getting more new customers than my peers? Are they driving more people in from social media than I am? Are they using different devices? So what we allow you to do is to actually go through and to select out of all the verticals that we have. You can do fitness, you can look at just at bodybuilding, at gyms and health clubs, you can go down to other areas in healthcare. And say, how do you define your competitive set? You can go, all right, we're going to do all fitness. We're just going to look at everybody. You can select your region. You can select different sizes. And then based on that, what we'll be able to do is to show you all of your performance data alongside everyone else, even by channel and different customer metrics. You can say, are you bringing more people in or less people in? We'll be able to give you a perspective on it. The same thing around cross-device. Are we strong in mobile or are we not? How's the rest of the market moving? We can actually compare it in the same way. To show you are actually getting a lot more traffic in this particular example. You're actually getting more traffic from tablet and desktop. You're doing better than everyone else. Maybe you're not. Not everyone is doing better. That's the entire point of benchmarks. There are going to be some companies that are ahead, some that are behind. We can now just surface it directly within the interface to give you some guidance to say, these are some areas competitively that you may want to improve. Yes? Right. So what we allow you to do is we allow, from that, the verticals are pretty much set, where you have to pick the individual verticals. This is how we categorize people. As you start getting more and more granular, so you take that national level, you can then specifically say, okay, we want to target people just within this geo, and then we want to target people that have about this amount of average daily traffic. When you do that, it won't tell you the companies in that set, but it will tell you how many companies are in that set overall. So it'll tell you whether you're comparing against 10 or 1,000 or 10,000. And that's as close as we get to it. We'll never reveal the individual domains that are tracking, but we try to give you enough so that you can pull the right switches to get companies that are very similar to yours. Thought I saw another question. Yes, ma'am.
They compare size to healthcare. So there's a difference between a hospital and a 500-bed hospital.
When you get into different metrics, when you go outside and say, we're not looking at page traffic, and we're not looking at the other thing, here's what I'd say. I'd say start with what we have and try to get a sense as to say, when you look at a gut check, and it says you're far behind and you have a feeling that your 50-bed hospital is being compared to someone that has a much larger one. Let us know. Let me know. Because this is a product that, we launched it a week ago. Over the next couple months, we're going to be adding more and more benchmark data in. But if there's a metric that you want to run that you can't, we want to know about it. And then we get it over to our product guys, and then they sit and they'll tell us, okay, no, we're building our own stuff. And then a couple weeks, it just magically appears, and they think it was their idea. But we like integrating it. So the more feedback you have about these tools, the better. But this is actually our first iteration. It took us about 2 years to build this. But it's great because it finally gives you a sense to say directionally. Now, as you go through, there's going to be questions about granularity. You may say, well, tablet and mobile, why is that? So that's why we're working on additional benchmarks to try to give you that why as well, as opposed to just the raw data. And that's something that I'm aware of too, is that one of the first things I started with when we got into this presentation was I talked about how much data there actually was, right? And how difficult it was to go through all of the data. And then all I've just done for the past 35 minutes or so is to give everybody here more data. we talk just about some basic ways that we can actually use this information. How can we drive better performance? Now, for context, the way that we look at it is that when you're looking at a customer-focused measurement, there's really three things you can do as a marketer. The first one is that you can bring in new customers, right? Acquisition, core to any marketing activity. The second thing you can do is you can develop and upsell existing customers. So people that are already at your door, they're already spending money, the classic McDonald's upsell, would you like fries with that? Same thing. To say, well, those people that are spending with us, who do we identify with and how do we get them to spend just a little bit more with us? How do we make them more valuable? And then the third thing is for those customers that you have that may abandon you, how do we keep them? Right? How do we make sure that all the money that we put in is not entirely wasted and then we have to go out and get a brand new relationship started? So that's kind of the context that we take in some of these examples. But the first one that we're going to start off with is how can we actually help you identify those best sources for new customers? Right? Now, there's a lot of different ways we can do it. We're going to talk about specific analyses. I'll give you a little bit of an answer if you're curious as to where good customers come from. Might just be us. I have to give this disclaimer. We had nothing to do with this study. In fact, WashU, this is Washington University. We're some students out there, some PhD students. So it's about a 5-hour, 6-hour drive away from here. When they finished this study, they actually couldn't find anybody at Google to talk to about this. Like I guess the story goes, they called the main line in Mountain View and said, hey, we did this really cool study. Who should we talk to? And just because of the way we operate, they're like, well, we don't know who's actually in charge of this. The study's public. We can send it out. But it gives a starting point. Now, your business is different. Your results may vary. So what we can actually do is take all this information and segment it out. So we can show you for any given channel, now that we have that customer level information, we can say which channels are actually reaching customers for the very first time. And once you reach them, once you get them into the funnel, once you get them started, which ones are likely to have the greatest probability of actually becoming customers of your business? So how do we focus on those acquisition channels? I don't even know where to spend your time and attention and love. We can actually break that information down because we can see that entire journey. We can see how that entire process began, where that first date started. Now we can also go from there to say, well, now that you have those people in, can we give you any insights to say, well, how do we develop them into better customers, right? There's going to be more than one interaction. There's going to be more than one date. Now we surface these. Now these benchmarks will be refreshed actually in the next month or two. But we still bring it up as a little bit of a tidbit. I'll explain what we did. We went through close to 40,000 companies that agreed to participate in this to see how do different channels interact at different stages of the journey. And this article, these data sets have actually been the most popular article that we have published. I think we've published close to 200 since on the Think with Google website. And this one still continues to destroy traffic because of what it has. And what it gives us a sense is to say that if we're building out a marketing mix, how should we expect different channels to perform if we're only looking at that individual conversion? So today, if you're only looking at people that clicked on something, if you're using a last click or last touch model, what channels are going to perform really, really well? And what we see, with no big surprise here, we think it's like direct and referrals. And referrals is actually weighted a little bit by coupon sites. You know, people get all the way to the point where they're about to purchase and then they see the coupon code field. How many people go back and actually look for a coupon code at that point? Almost everybody's in their heads. And then from a marketer's standpoint, you say, how many people get really frustrated when your customers just go and look for a coupon code? It's like you sold them, they're at the shopping cart, and now they're going to open up a new browser tab. We understand why, but we can actually break that down, and we see exactly that's why referral sites usually end up being very, very close. Because they push people, that's how they get credit. Now, we see all the way on the far side, we see display clicks. We didn't even factor impressions in this run. The display clicks, if you have 4 customers that are clicking on display ads that eventually go to buy, only one of those will actually do it on display. The other 3 are going to go to a different channel, which will then take credit for what they did. So we can start to understand that. Now, what do we do with this information once we have it? And by the way, we'll share the link. It'll be at the end of this presentation. We'll send it out afterwards. We can run segments based on geo and by vertical as well. The question is, what do you do with this information? Now, the first thing to note is that we're not limited just to channels. We can actually run this for any one of your campaigns, any one of your keywords, any of your placements. We can even do it for referral sites. So we can actually build a report to say, these are your referrals, these are your affiliate partners. That we actually had one that 99 times out of 100 that they were involved in the path, they were the very last interaction. Most customers are interacting 3 or 4 times. They were the very last one. Conveniently placed. Yes? We capture everything that comes to the site, regardless of language. We're able to capture it, we're able to show you, we'll show it on a map. And I'll give you an example. If you even move past and say, well, let's get away from this. What if we were to do a really healthy example? Cookies. What would that path look like from a keyword level? And these are the stories we actually see. We see where people start early on, and this makes sense to us. It's very intuitive, and that's how we see the data play out as well, that most people, when they're starting early on, they may not know exactly what they're looking for. They may be exploring. They may be thinking, well, what are good, coming up to the holiday season, what are good gift ideas? What should I be thinking about? And then you get an idea, and then you start asking, is this actually a good gift idea? Who are good vendors? Who are good companies? And then you get closer, and you get to these keywords here, and that's usually the ones to take credit for it. Those are the keywords that usually look like they have a phenomenal ROI that all the Googlers and back usually get questions for to say, if you can get me more of these keywords, I will spend as much money as I can on them. The question is, well, where do they come from? Right? Because if you have someone up there that's looking for holiday gift ideas and you're not even present in it, what's the chances that they're eventually going to find you when they get closer to a purchase? Now, we don't ask for blind faith here, but what most companies do, the basis by how they test this and just get a general sense is to say, you know what, if I expect these keywords to perform differently, if I expect things like holiday gift ideas to be a lot further away from a conversion, what they'll do is they'll usually segment them out into individual groups, and they'll just use it to set very basic CPA targets. So they'll say, for these terms all the way at the bottom that I think are getting credit from other terms, I'm going to give them I'm going to tell them that they have to hit a 30% better CPA target than what I expect those terms at the end to hit. That's the basis for an experiment and to test and to explore. We've actually had one customer, and they won't release a case study on this because they don't want to go out and tell their competitors about the keywords. They're not in this vertical, so that's actually good. They were actually able to drive a 6x increase in the number of conversions that they had, just because they were looking at how to drive people through those terms. Eventually what happens too, these terms will go up at the same time and they'll continue to take credit, but when you look at everything, you can just look at an aggregate to say we ended up with more conversions, more orders during this period that we ran this test. Now, if you want a precise thing, if you say, you know what, I don't want a 30% target, it seems arbitrary, and it is. We just need a starting point to test. That's where this whole idea of attribution comes in. Maybe some of you have heard about it, but it's effectively building a specific weight to say how much credit do we give to each individual interaction. We're building these. More and more tools will come. You'll see some really exciting stuff. We acquired a company to help do this. The only reason I bring it up is because you can't really talk about all these things without bringing up the attribution discussion. But when you look at this slide, this is hard as hell for a lot of companies to do. And not only is it hard, but we talked about those original silos earlier. The problem is, imagine trying to go to different groups and getting them to align on a new strategy. When one of them is going to do really well, things like display tend to do really well. And then others, imagine if you had like an affiliate manager. Imagine that conversation. You go to them and see like, so we're going to use this new attribution model, which means that everything you've been doing, we're going to give it 60% less credit. Conversations aren't going to go well, right? Not going to go well. You're going to have the display team celebrating. They're going to go up 200-300%. Then other people will be like, no, you're not taking credit away from me. We actually have seen companies that use this. We actually had one company that because one team didn't like the results that another team had, they actually hired their own attribution team to come up with a completely different answer and a completely different mandate. This stuff happens. We're aware of it. But we just want to keep things simple to say we want to focus on very short-term things we can do, which is to let's explore the opportunities that are up there outside of the funnel that we can invest in, that we can explore with, and let's prove as a business that it drives better performance. And then figure out how to operationalize it. Now, the other thing we can do too is we can actually develop individual channels to where they work best. Right? Channels work in different ways. So take display, for instance. This is a study that we had, this was Wharton and Carnegie Mellon, where they found out display ads actually have a significant impact of people early on in the decision-making process. Terrible at getting people to convert. Actually, they found out that when you try to use display ads, and there's a caveat for remarketing, when you try to use display ads and you hit people too hard when they're close to making a purchase, it actually makes them less likely to convert. Feel like they're being stalked. They jump ship. Right? We just measure the overall conversion rate. And we also found is things like mobile, going back to that. They can do different things. Now, this example, this picture was actually very deliberate. Yesterday, I was actually in a taxi with one of our VPs going up. We were talking about these concepts. And I asked him, I was like, so, we just got off a flight from American. And I said, so how many miles do you fly on American? He's like, lifetime? About 3 million. What he has. 3 million miles. And I said, great. I'm like, so, and you still fly now? So I'm like, obviously you have the American Airlines app. He's like, yeah, I love it. I use it all the time. I'm like, okay, what do you use it for? Well, boarding pass, loyalty information, flight status. Asked me, I'm like, you ever book a flight? You ever convert? It's like, not a single time. Right? Now, if you're sitting there at American Airlines and you're thinking, wow, why should we invest in this? Nobody's actually using it to book. It's because mobile may have a deeper purpose for us. This is actually, instead of me saying it, this is actually a quote from the CEO of Priceline, which also owns Booking.com and a number of other properties. Where they show that what their concern is not necessarily the transaction, but the relationship. Those elements we talked about upselling and developing customers, also being able to retain them. So for instance, what if you had a customer that was logging into your website every week? Some of you have community forums. Maybe you're sending them emails and they're not opening it. Now, do you want to just keep your app there in case they want to buy again? Or do you want to think about using your app, maybe send them a push notification to say, hey, we haven't seen you in a while. Is there anything we can do? What about using it as a feedback mechanism to see if they're happy with your products or services so you can get that information in real time? Those are not typically defined as marketing conversions, but if those customers leave, it makes your life harder. What we do is when we look at solutions for measuring, we actually just segment this information out very simply by people using your mobile app versus people who aren't. Right? We take that spreadsheet approach where we just load in a whole bunch of ones and zeros to say, are they actually using your mobile app? Yes and no. And let's segment those customers out. Because if you're segmenting out your customer base and you're seeing absolutely no change between people that are using your mobile app and not using your mobile app, which means they're not spending any more money, they're not staying with you longer, they're not investing in other product categories, then there's a problem with how you're engaging people. You have a wonderful opportunity, but it's not actually changing behavior. And I can tell you for a lot of companies that we work with, this is actually the case. Where all that's happening, they're seeing traffic come in, they're seeing purchases made on mobile, but they're not incremental. They're not improving customer lifetime value. And that's the last opportunity I have for you this morning, is how we actually can pay attention and then respond to different things that are happening along the entire customer journey. Here's one example. Since we've been talking about this customer story, this customer path, I always like to surface this to give you a different perspective on it. So if this were my path as a customer of yours, now go through. Majority of people here would likely look at this 25-cent ad click, look at the fact that I spent money or that I converted and say that was wonderful. And that $2 click and that $1 click were entirely wasted. All right, we'll look at it from a channel. We'll look at it from a keyword perspective. And now we can actually aggregate it to say that my cost as a customer was $3.25. That might be good, that might be bad. Now what happens if you expect me to convert after 3 or 4 interactions and this is actually my entire path? Now there's a lot more clicks. Right? You expected me to convert here, maybe at this interaction, and I keep going. Let me ask, how many people here, how many would recognize that a customer is still going through their journey and hasn't made a decision? How many of you would give them a different content experience on the website? How many of you would change your marketing strategy? This is where we're headed. Now, as an example, this is a example that's about 2 years old, but it's a real case that we saw on the retail side, and I'm sure that it's true for people here. We actually have had customers that click a lot. We had one example that I just love. It sticks in my head. We found out that someone clicked 74 times on a paid search ad before they converted. How much do you think each of those clicks were? The average was about $2. Think about how much money that is. By the way, marginal contribution, were they worth it? No, it was only worth about $10 to the business. So that business took a loss of about $130, $140. Now we asked that business, we asked the marketing team, we said, well, this person kept clicking over and over. Okay, we didn't need to change our website. What did you learn about that customer? Did you know anything? And they're like, well, no, we just know that they clicked on the ad and then they bought the product. And I said, so what if, and they actually were clicking on the same keyword over and over again. This was over time, by the way, so this wasn't spam. But they clicked this keyword over and over again. I said, well, what happens to that keyword performance? I'm like, well, we're going to have 74 clicks, and we're going to have 73 that didn't convert and 1 that did. So that keyword's going to look pretty bad. And well, what if that was a great keyword for you? And the opportunity was lost because of how customers were behaving. And what if you had an opportunity to actually go through and to say, you know what, we don't want to spend anything. We're going to put these people on negative remarketing lists and pull them out of the auction. Or when they get to this 4th interaction and we expect them to convert at that point, that's when we're going to give them a different message or a different signal. And we think, well, how many people does this happen? Because we think of our own experiences, right? We'll go to Amazon, we'll click once, and then we'll buy our product. Here's what some of these conversion paths really look like. These are actual people. These are not hard to find. If you have analytics, they're in your account right now. You see this very top line. People in the back, it's going to be really small fonts. You have people going from 9 paid search interactions, another 4, another 8, another 6, another 9, another 3. all with specific costs. And in this particular case, nothing changed. People just kept clicking. That's a relationship element. We need to respond if people keep coming up to you. If they came up to you in real life and kept asking you the same question, like what if, picture this for a moment. You wake up in the morning, you pick up your phone, and someone's calling you like, I've talked to you every single day for the past 3 months. You haven't bought our product. You keep asking me the same question. You're going to treat them a little bit differently. You're going to respond. Maybe you hang up the phone and say, I'm not dealing with this. We do that. But we have the capabilities now to understand it. And a lot of the things, like you may see this on the retail side especially. This happens every time you go to, I think maybe they took it off because I was criticizing them at one conference. This is Jack Spade. Every time you go to their site, they give you a coupon for signing up. And most people, if you didn't know, you could actually, if you have a Gmail address, you can actually add a period to your Gmail address. And most of these verification street use a brand new email address. So I'm on their email list about 8 or 9 times. Why would they offer everybody this promotion, right? You don't need to offer it to everybody. People are going to come in. Maybe they're going to buy anyway. So what did you do? You just gave 15% off. Typical retail margins floating around 30, 32%. Just gave away half of your profit for no reason. So we can be smarter than that. Because now we can understand where customers are, how they've interacted, in tools to change the way they respond. We can also do things, maybe we have customers that are going down this path where we notice that there's signals where people are going through. And to say, well, we have people that are looking for information saying, I'm having problems. Where do I complain? How do I cancel my subscription? How do I cancel my membership? We can actually go through and identify those people and bring them back in, take action. Sometimes we actually see lags even between when people are looking to cancel subscription to when they actually pick up the phone and make that a call. We had an example earlier today. We were talking outside about telco companies and insurance companies. Like with insurance, I just canceled my insurance plan. Just got married, now we cancel our insurance plan. We're going to merge it to one company. By the time I called up that company to cancel, I already had a brand new policy in place. They lost their opportunity. When did I start looking about information to cancel my policy? About 2 or 3 weeks prior. We can actually identify those. That's the reason why we're so insistent about tracking those individual actions. We can actually give you totals to say, these are how many people looked at canceling their subscription on your site. This is who they are in your CRM database. And this is how you can actually go and target them right now. Then you also may have customers that you have no idea what the hell they're going to do. They're clicking on random ads. Are these people we want to spend time with? Are they not? What do we do? And that's also where we can help you. This is a direction as to where we're going as a company to make these things even easier. So we launched a product called Smart Lists. And what it will do is it will take every interaction you have along that path. It will take about 200 other variables inside Google Analytics. And it will say, are these people behaving like customers? We don't need an explicit action like adding something to a cart. We simply say, how are they behaving? What are the conversations? Kind of like going back to that relationship example. Do you guys have a good relationship or not? You can kind of get a sense. We can do that through math. You enable it really through a simple checkbox. But we can actually go and start doing back-end machine learning to figure it out. So these things will become automated. We will make this easier for you. But the advantage now is whenever we roll these things out and we scale them to everybody, that means everyone in your market, all your competitors have access to the exact same tools, the same insights, the same information. So that's always a risk and reward trade-off. Earlier on, a little bit harder to do, a little bit more manual, a little bit more risk. But you're also doing things in a way that's different than the entire auction, which lends to its own advantages. You'll have to decide how you want to do it, but we're here to help. The big thing, we covered a lot of content. I'm going to narrow it down to 3 things for you. We're moving around to a focus around customers, not simply going out and getting the next order, the next conversion, but how we build relationships, how we maintain relationships over time. Reducing those metrics, tracking everything, all 100,000, just to those that are really important, that give us a sense as to what customers are doing. Customer lifetime value is very important in there, but even simpler things just to say, are we bringing in more new customers than we're retaining? Who are our valuable customers? Hell, how many customers do we actually have? Those are very simple metrics that are incredibly telling for businesses. Just understanding who those people are. And the very last one is to iterate on opportunities. I don't want anyone here to go back and change your business's entire marketing strategy. It's not worth it. But just know what's out there and begin exploring what can happen. We'll help you along the way. You don't have to tear up everything you have. It got you this far. Made you successful. But we do want to give you what the next stages will be to keep you ahead of it. This will disrupt a lot of businesses, a lot of business models, a lot of advertising channels. We want to make you aware of it, give you the tools to measure and track. Last thing, we covered a lot of resources, a lot of materials. I like to give links to all of them if you want it. If not, I'm sure we'll probably send them out. Keep in mind, these things are case sensitive. But just to walk you through it, that very first one is that customer journey. Those benchmarks of 40,000 advertisers, you can split it down by geo, by vertical. Also look for an update coming in the next couple weeks to that with even more data about what's happening across the entire customer journey, including hopefully display impressions and video impressions as well. Second one on there, customer centricity. This is actually a book, not by Google, but by a Wharton professor who has published like 200 papers in this area. He simplified everything down to about a 45-minute read, which is great. We have dozens of copies circulating around our office. It's worth just taking a look at, especially if you have a flight home. It's a really good book, really easy read, really actionable as well. Third one is just, we did write a quick article on the Think with Google website. If a book's not in order, we tried to consolidate a lot of these principles down to a page and a half. And then the very last one, Universal Analytics, the worst product name ever. Consider it Google Analytics 2.0 is really what it is. But all that technical information about how to take that spreadsheet and drop it into Google Analytics, or how you integrate offline information, or how you get audience data, it's all part of that product. So I just gave you one single link if you're curious to know what those measurement capabilities are, or at least what we're doing. But again, don't get hung up on it. Just make sure that you can do these types of customer analyses with whatever you're running. So with that, now we're just about at time. We can do a few questions. If not, I'll be hanging out during lunch. I want to make sure everyone, you guys are probably hungry. We probably have some delicious food back there. What do you truck? You have no conversion at all. Yep. If there's no clear conversion, the way that I look at it is tracking anything for a business that can signify that you, first of all, you can measure, and then that actually signifies a change in the relationship you have with who eventually becomes your patient or your consumer. So even if it's 2 or 3 steps out from them actually becoming a patient, if it indicates a change in a relationship, it's something that I track, and that way I can optimize for. But that's usually the approach that I take. It doesn't even a good debate that we see with automotive companies, right? They can't sell cars online. People buy in dealerships, and rarely do they go to the corporate side, and there's 3 or 4 levels between it. They'll usually track things like, well, when are people actually looking for financing information? And when are people actually trying to customize their own car? Because they indicate different levels of intent. And there's things to be explored there. Now, this is a process that we'll go through. Usually what we'll do is we'll come up with a list of hypotheses, we do this with auto, of different things that we could track that with what you know about your business may be significant of a change. And then we test those hypotheses to see if they actually signify people that are going different in the funnel or not. So going back to that auto example, just because it's one that we recently did. On the auto side, a lot of automotive manufacturers actually track people customizing cars. So like if you're customizing a car and you're adding options, they track. And they actually look for people that are tracking high-end automobiles with really lots of options because like these people are willing to spend a lot of money. So it made sense to track this as a possible conversion. You're bringing people in who are interested in your car. What we actually learned from testing was that those people that actually customize a car tend out to be more like 14 and 16-year-old enthusiasts who want to see how awesome of a car they can actually build than people that are buying a car. What was more indicative are people that are looking to finance a car, right? Because that's boring. Nobody wants to do that. But it's closer to those people actually getting to make a purchase. That's the type of iterative process we usually go through with those types of actions. So maybe we don't get to that stage where they actually become patient, but getting closer to say that you're actually making progress, and then running tests to prove that it has a causal relationship with actions later on. Yes? User ID override. Yeah, okay, so is user ID override cookie-based? That slide where I had the hello name tag, I joke around, we're not good at naming products. It should not be called user ID. It should be like, hello, my name is, or this is my customer's name. It is cookie-based, but in a weird way. So what happens? You go to a website, Google Analytics assigns you a random cookie ID. It has no idea who the hell you are. It's just going to say, okay, your customer, AXBY, 15, it goes out for like 20 characters. When you provide an ID, a name tag to it, what we do is associate it on our end. So we say, we serve that cookie, this is who that customer is, but that ID is not actually surfaced in the cookie itself. So we match everything on the back end. The reason why we match it on the back end is it allows you to change it on the fly without having to wait for that cookie to come back from that customer. So cookies are usually dependent on the machine itself. We just match it on the back end. What that also allows, I should have covered this in a separate slide. This will kind of be cool. We can do cross-device tracking. So if you assign that ID, someone clicks on their email on their mobile device and they go to their tablet, then they go to their desktop, we can actually join those paths together now and look at it from one customer. So yes, we rely on cookies, but it's largely a back-end process. We isolate everything at the Google Analytics account level. So we don't share any information back or forth. That's the reason why we rely on our advertisers to assign unique IDs instead of using like a Google login or some PII. That information is restricted to your account. We do nothing with it, apart from bringing in audience data, but that's just flowing data in as opposed to pushing anything out. There was one other question, yes?
How would you recommend segmenting your customers and prospects to determine the lifetime value? Because I was thinking we could do it by geographic location, or gender, age, type of advertising, but what do you recommend?
Usually I stay away from demographic segmentation because it leads to some problems. For instance, you may realize that you have a lot of customers that are men between 18 and 24. The question is that because that's who your best customer base is, or that's just who you've been targeting? So we usually let the data itself explain. So what we'll do is we start with the basic segmentation after we do something like customer lifetime value, and we simply look at who the high-performing customers are. And then we use those demographics as almost explanatory variables to help get a sense as to why they might be high-performing customers. But we always let behavior itself dictate as opposed to those segmentations. So usually quartiles, quintiles, to just say who those values are, and then try to understand why. And then even if we can't understand why, we just try to figure out where they came from, or other signals as to how they're behaving as a basis for going after them to saying they're going to be high or low value in the future.
Do you know how you would use that in your AdWords account? Because I was thinking something simple like, say if like banner ads had a high lifetime value, you could do something like that. How exactly would you recommend using that in your?
What we typically do is we'll look for, at the very start of the path, if we're focusing on new customer acquisition, we'll look at where other high value customers have come from, what their interactions have been, and we use that as a basis to heavy up spend on those particular keywords or put them into a separate campaign. Now, once we then invest in that particular campaign, then we run again to say, out of those people that reached that campaign, that ended up converting, did that lifetime value continue? Sometimes yes, sometimes no, and it's one of those things you have to test. I'll use display as an example. Sometimes people will look and they'll say, wow, display is really driving a lot of high value customers. In fact, we had a retailer where anybody that started on display, they ended up having just from an average order value perspective, we're 60% higher. But then as they tried scaling it, they started reaching different customers. The frequencies changed. So they weren't actually reaching the same population, and that required a different strategy. But locking onto those customers at acquisition thing is usually more of an art than a precise science because of how it scales. But we do look to see where they came from, how they behaved, and then we can use that demographic information to say maybe people that are men 18 to 24 are higher CLV, and we can certainly test on it, but it's less likely to be the case. It's more around how the customers are behaving than who we expect them to be. It's a lot of information for an hour, wasn't it? I think everyone, you can just breathe from learned a lot. As I said, hold on to one or two ideas. Don't try to take all this in. We're here to help you get all the rest of them in. That's just part of the fun of what we get to do. Okay.
Any other questions for Neil?
Thank you, Neil. Thank you very much. Thanks a bunch. So lunch is back there. So we'll turn everyone loose at lunch in about 3 minutes. Okay. So you may not. Maybe you're slightly overwhelmed, or not. But I'm just wondering, would anybody be willing to volunteer one thing they're going to do when they go back to the office today that they hadn't, or tomorrow, that they hadn't planned on doing as a result of something they saw today? Anybody have a particular thing they're going to do? Yeah. You're going to play with the new benchmark tool. Okay, that's very specific. I suspect there's probably more than one person who's going to do that. Okay. Anybody else have some? Yeah, Karen. Going to optimize your TrueView Creative. Okay, great. Anybody else have anything? Obviously not asking you to share anything proprietary, but anybody else going to do anything else or any of those things? No? Okay. Well, then we'll have to follow up with the rest of you to give you an assignment, I suspect. Okay? And people will be waiting for you at the sandwich bar. Okay, so at about 1 o'clock, we start speed dating. it's not traditional speed dating. You actually have signed up for a date already, and you should know who you are. I think some of you are spending some time individually with Neil. Not I think, I know. Some of you are spending some individual time with Neil, and some of you are spending some time with Jonathan Calfee, who's one of our performance solutions specialists who specifically works on identifying opportunities to use audience targeting within our performance product suite. So you know who you are. Your team will find you when it's your time. I think we're going to try to do all of it in here, starting at 1 o'clock. If not, we've reserved another room so we can split people up if there's a little too much of a din of noise or anything like that. Again, I want to thank you for your time today. I really hope even if all of you didn't raise your hands, you have something new to think about when you get back to work later today or tomorrow. And you'll engage your Google team members here. Again, if you'd like an introduction to somebody else another company or organization that you saw on the list, ask your Google team partner for that introduction. I'm also going to try to get John back here for a couple minutes during lunchtime because at least one of you expressed an interest in speaking to him a little bit more, maybe not about TrueView, but about other business opportunities as it relates to travel. We're going to send out a survey to you sometime in the next several hours. We hope you'll respond honestly and directly to the survey, as many of you as can. As I mentioned, this is the third one of these we've done. We really take the surveys seriously and adjust the content of these based on the surveys. The speed dating sessions today have changed dramatically since the last time we did it, based specifically on feedback we got after the last speed dating session. I don't think I have anything else except to give away a cool product. So here's the question, folks. Every day on Google, a certain percentage of the searches that are done on that day on Google are brand new searches that have never been done before. Okay. Okay. You know, you had the option for me to complete the question, but you did not accept the option. Okay? So between 16 and 20% of searches done on Google in any given day are new searches that have never been done before. And you guessed 19%, which was within the range. You get a Samsung Gear smartwatch. Okay? Told you it was going to be cool. Wow. Okay? Congratulations. Okay, again, thank you, everybody. Enjoy lunch. If you're sticking around for speed dating, you know, you can hang out here. We've got another room if we need it. And we really appreciate your partnership. I think the last thing I'll say, I heard it in both John's presentation and in Neil's presentation. They both talked about a journey, right? A journey as a marketer, right? If you think about the last hour in particular, we probably are looking at a long journey that requires a lot of hard work. John's description and around TrueView and video seemed arduous, but with open, transparent partnership, those journeys become a lot easier and yield far better results. So we're here for the long haul, for the journey with you. And today is just another step in that journey. So thanks again for coming out today. Bye.